something we talked about because Brockton is so much bigger than a place like Warren. It really depends on what the needs of the individual districts are at the time. Kind of first come, first serve, and they would have a limit of how many seats they could actually take.
So like a current student doesn't get bumped out?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Review and discuss capital improvement plan for spring town meeting.
You're up to see. So we had a change for the to discuss again the spring meeting capital improvement, and that is we made a change with our priorities. We had a minibus lease on there, a final payment for $22,000, and we have taken that out, and we have put in a as priority one, JCS elevator repair. We had a state inspection that came in the fall, and after that inspection, they came up with a preventive maintenance item that we needed to tend to, which was the in back information that we provided, which was the hydraulic cylinder needs to be replaced. And the reason for that is in case fluid leaks from it, there's no tray or anything catching that at the bottom of the elevator shaft, so it will go into the soil and contaminate it. So because the building was built in 1978, they didn't have the tray there at that time. So we put it on now because we wanted to talk to the town, talk to Mike and James to ask how they thought we should go forward with this. We also need to get a 90-day extension from the state. So once we got, once we were confident talking with the elevator company that we were going to get this, and talking with the town, this was the direction that they suggested that we go in as well. He did say that it would help supplement the cost of $30,000 facilities. So it will not be that full $68,760. It will be the difference of supplement. The rest is the same. It's still for the second exit at the Norton Middle School, and still the K through all that.
So what are we doing with the minibus?
We made that payment. It was due because it was due sooner. They would do that. They must have waited till the springtime meeting to pay it.
Okay.
That we made the $22,000.
Okay. Any questions on this?
Did you get more than one quote, or do we have like a contract with Buckley? Or we have a contract with Buckley, but if this is when we do start this, we get the exception from the state, we're going to go out there for quotes just to make sure that that's
Is the elevator in good working use, or is it like offline right now?
no, it's in good work use. We needed the extensions that they didn't have a hold on the. If we were not able to get that exception from the state before we had the work done, they would close down the elevator, which is obviously a difficult thing for us to do with our students and staff that may need the elevator at any time. So thankfully they gave us that 90-day extension.
Do we, I'm assuming here, we have the extension, because this just stated October 19th.
Yeah, so you have originally 90 days to, so we have 480 days to do this work. Yes, yes.
All right, cool. And then so we're going to, I guess from the town side of things, we're going to, the Norton Public School will fund $30,000.
Yeah.
The town will be on the hook for 38.
That's correct. Yes, so they advised us to put the full 68 on there and just acknowledge that we're going to kind of.
To make sure that all the costs of the town.
Yeah.
So then we'll get additional quotes after this, hopefully the state gets the extension.
Yeah.
Now what happens if the state doesn't get the extension?
We already received it.
Beautiful. Great. Perfect. Good.
Anything else?
Nope. Maybe ask this before. We always put curriculum.
Historically, we did, until we were able to.
I knew I was going to ask that question.
Well, because we
I didn't have that answer.
last time you brought it up.
we did, yeah, so we did talk about at the last meeting.
All right, so that's why I said it.
Historically, we always put curriculum on capital plans, and we went through a very rote cycle with subject areas to the capital planning committee. So 1 year it was ELA pre-K to 12, everyone would get new materials and so on. Once we started bringing in some school choice money, we were able to use school choice funds for that, and
unfortunately, with the majority of our school choice funding tied up in staffing, we'll no longer have that flexibility.
All right, so we haven't seen it. So,
Yes.
okay, gotcha.
Anything else on that? Okay. Are you guys ready?
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries at all. Alright, so starting off with the JCS is excited to welcome artist Joshua Weiner to the school next week for a 3-week residency at JCS. Using drawings from the students, Mr. Weiner has developed a plan for a large-scale mosaic mural in the library that celebrates a love for literature and the natural surroundings of JCS and Norham. JCS students, parents, and Wheaton students, and hopefully some NHS students as well, will work with Josh on piecing together all of the mosaics to create a lasting piece of art that families can enjoy for years to come. Many thanks to the JCS parents organization and need for funding this project. Prior to that, we will be having our annual Martin Luther King Assembly, which is focused on peace and acceptance. Music, poetry, and slideshows will usher the JCS community into this weekend's important holiday.
So from the middle school, NMS Drama Club is proud to announce that the production for this year will be Willy Wonka. Students are excited about this news and are eager for auditions to take place next week. NMS sports are enjoying success this winter, with both basketball teams winning on a consistent basis, along with hockey and wrestling seeing success on the ice and mat as well. NMS is proud to be welcoming a very special guest speaker on January 24th, Miss Ivy Watts. Ivy Watts is an inspirational guest speaker who meets with the school groups all around the country to discuss the perils of depression and suicide ideation. Ivy is being brought to our school through a generous grant from Sarah's Village and additional funds from the NMS Parent Board. Lastly, NMS will be hosting our seventh annual 7th grade midway social next Friday for 7th grade only. This special event marks the halfway or midpoint on the calendar of their careers here at NMS.
And for the Yale, students are beginning to get super excited for our HAY PTO Boost-a-thon fundraiser to begin. Free registration for the fun run started on January 10th. The Boost-a-thon on-campus personnel will be working with their staff next week to build in incentives for our students. Then, from our big kickoff day on Wednesday, January 24th, with the Boost-a-thon happening January 24th through February 2nd, with our Glow Fun Run happening in the gym on Friday, February 2nd throughout the day. This is the big fundraiser we do for the year, which will help us pay for the new playground structures we purchased last year. We are still working on paying them off. The kids have little incentives each day to earn fun privileges throughout, and then the big incentive of raising $20,000 will be for Mr. Gigan and Mr. Balawa to do something fun and a little crazy. In past years, we've kissed pigs, exotic animals, including a kangaroo, and last year, dueling as Yale Knights. We can't wait to see what we are going to have to do this year.
From the high school students at the high school are looking forward to the new semester of new classes as well as some great events. Right after break, 55 NHS DECA members competed at district competitions in Hyannis. Our team did Norton proud. An amazing 40 competitors finished in the top 10 of their events, and 26 students qualified for state competition in March, with top 6 finishes. Excellent work. The talent show is on January 25th, singing, dancing, improv, and music. Also on Saturday, February 3rd, the high school will host a vendor fair for entrepreneurial students and members of the educational products and services. That's all I have for you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Anybody have anything? Thank you. All right, so, through capital, FY 25 budget update. Sandy?
So what you have in front of you is our level service budget request. Our final budget for FY 24 was $34,706,143. We have an increase of $4,166,987 for our proposed budget of $38,973,431, which is 12.01%. This is the first time in several years that we don't have the federal police money, so the increase is higher. On the next page that you have is the breakdown of what makes up this $4 million increase. The very first item is our salaries and their contractual obligations, which makes up, $2.6 million. And that is without the, supplement that we got from ESSER money. What makes up the contract, obligations is our teachers' contract support for FY '25, which is 2.75%. Our para average increase for 7.5%, our admin assistants for 2%, and plus their extra days worked, and custodials contract for 4%. The rest of our salary lines are the next are our added district increases. The first one is just our added district tuition for $772,313, and the next is the added district special ed transportation increase for $348,400. And these two added district increases alone make up $1.1 million of salary. The next is $73,000, which is our special education expenses, and this is other programs that we have, tutoring and other various services. The next is our transportation for $46,000, which we had a 4.5% increase, and that's just going up the past several years. We are going up this year, so that may change for contract spending. And then we have $50,000 increase in homeless transportation, which is much higher than we have budgeted in the past, but we also have spent close to $200,000 in the past several years. And then the next is our $78,000 for the operation maintenance, which that is our management costs, which is our maintenance contract, custodial supplies, and other utility lines. And the remaining 187, so that is just our unanticipated special ed contingency funds that we have, or other unexpected costs that might arise.
Do we have the number of what the special education mandates are going to be? So for example, if our budget is $38 million, how much of that is mandated that we can't adjust at all?
Yes. The mandated amount makes up about 39% of our total budget. So all the, we didn't break it out yet into the two different budgets that you've typically seen, but it's all in that line by line budget that we gave you in the background. But separated out, it is $15 million.
So the increase in special education itself is $2,032,446. That is just the special education.
You said that one more time, sorry.
$2,032,446. Sorry. That is just, so that's special education staff, not increased staff. There are no new staff members in that number there. Tuitions and transportation, as well as services for students. It's roughly 39%. So the overall special education budget is $15,049,963, which is nearly 39% of our overall budget.
And it's a 15%, roughly 15% increase from last year.
13.5.
So we have an increase of 13.5% from fiscal year 24 that we're anticipating in fiscal year 25. Where is those mandates coming from? Why is it that much increased? Is it different legislation? Is it kind of what is that? I guess from a taxpayer standpoint, why is it going up that much?
So that was why we wanted to really include this page for you. We felt like it was really important for everyone to be able to see, like, okay, we started $34,706,443. How do we get from that point to the $38 million and change that we're asking from? I'm a very concrete, logical thinker, and for me, I thought, we talked about this at length. We need to show people how these numbers are adding up. So Nick, to your point, in this first line here, this $2.6 million worth of salaries, those are special education staff members as well. So
So let me just, that's all staff members.
that is all staff.
Schools is that person.
Yes, that is right. So our question would, we want to see that in general education versus special education, so you guys can see. We can do that for you as well. But for the first pass, we wanted to give you a general overview. Okay, so that is contractual obligations for our teachers, for our paraprofessionals, for custodial administrators, administrative assistants. That is every staff member and what their contractual increases. This year, we're currently using $500,000 of ESSER funds. So off the top, that number is $500,000 higher than it would have been if we weren't losing those funds. The number of students that are receiving special education services or that have needs that are more significant to put them within a specialized program or in an out-of-district placement, those numbers are larger than they were in the past. This is no new regulations, really no new staff. It's just the increased costs of what it takes to do business and to make sure that our students are getting the supports that they need.
And we don't have any control or any say on a collaborative tuition or anything like that, so like,
No.
so I guess my question, so if I had a big building and I started a collaborative, I could say everyone that wants to come here pays me $45,000. Like, how does that, I
So
guess,
that's voted by
work?
the boards. So like as your representative to the Reeds board and the FICO board, we vote each year on what that increase will be based on the, what it's costing them to run their buildings, whatever their needs are. And it's typically between 3 and 5%. I believe this year FICO said it's probably going to be about 3.5%. We have not heard about the increase from Reeds yet. However, last year, at the state level, they approved a 14% increase for private placements for students as part of the OSD. And that was traditionally very succinct in terms of like anywhere from 2 to 5%. 14 was a huge, huge increase. So now we're, as Danez says every year, that compounds. So we're paying on top of that.
I wonder if Dan is, like, Dan, I'm sorry about putting words in your mouth, but I wonder if he's, when he's driving at us, so what's the oversight that 14% is the right number? So is it based on some type of budgeted costs that they can show? These private institutions, are they for-profit, not-for-profit, non-profit? What, so, where's the check and balance, I guess?
And for us, unfortunately, all of that happens at the state level, and as a school committee and as a superintendent, we have no control over it at all. Kristen, can you tell me, can you just share with them the OSD information?
Yeah, so the OSD sets the rates for, and they're kind of the oversight agency for the Commonwealth. So they're the ones that work with private schools and set the rates. So,
What's OSDs are?
Operations Service Division.
And they set the rate on a school-by-school basis, or they approve?
Statewide,
So they just say 14% is the right number.
for everyone.
Everybody's costs are up 14% this year. It's amazing. Nobody had a different, nobody had less than you.
Yeah, or they say on average, or whatever they say. Well, last year was 14, what?
But it matters, right?
Oh, absolutely.
On average, because what if my costs were up 18%? I'm not saying that they should be. What if they weren't? So now, as that private institution, I can't run this spectrum. I mean, sorry.
So I guess my other question to Dinez's point, when we look at placement of our students versus, in a collaborative environment like a Reeds or a BICO versus a private setting, do we have that number of who's at a collaborative, like just numbers?
Yes, we do.
Who's at? And so I know we had talked about, some students in, special facilities, things like that. Is that what we're considering, like those specialized facilities?
So what we always do, and I'm sorry, Vinny, in case you have questions over other family obligations. The way that it always works is we always start with our local collaboratives, especially those that we're members of. So for Reeds, for example, Reeds and BICO, those are the two the collaboratives that we're members of. We always start there to see if they have a program that meets the needs of the student that we're looking for placement. And oftentimes they do, and we're able to work with them. It also depends on if they have space available for that student as well, if they can meet the student's needs. If they are not able to accommodate that student for whatever reason, we typically go up to other collaboratives looking for places that have programs, but also aren't extremely far away, right? Because we also have to transport our students, and it's not good for any students to be on the bus or in a van for a long period of time each day. From there, we go to private settings that are closer. to make sure that they have a program that is appropriate for the student. It's all a team-based decision, so at the end of the day, it's a team that will recommend placement, and the parents will go out and visit it, make sure it's appropriate place for their child, and they can also say, yes, we really like this, or, we don't think this is a great fit, at these reasons why. So it's, oftentimes it takes quite a while to find a placement for a student, and we're working with that student at family day to day in order to make sure it's the best place for them.
So if a student goes to a collaborative, say, end of September, and then, I know they have their goals and they meet their, and so on and so forth. How does the cost work if, say, they meet all their goals and they're back in district, say, in March? Like, how do those numbers, like, do we get a credit, or, like, how does it, I guess my question is, if we know our X number, September 1st is this, but say March 1st, we have 20 less kids at collaboratives because they've met their goals and achieved what we want them to achieve.
Very aggressive, a number there.
I'm just saying, I'm trying to figure out
How that works.
how the history of it, just to get a grasp on, we can't control the cost, but we want our students to be successful.
Absolutely.
So just how does that work with costs? Like, do we just stop paying, or is it like I know our reimbursement number is like the year after or something like that. October 1st, whatever it is. So
And then so if they stop mid-year collaborative, then we stop when they stop going. We stop paying, and then when we do the reimbursement for circuit breaker, we put in their end date. So like you said, it is hard to predict. We have students moving all the time. And then private schools, depending on several factors, usually own it. If they're jumping to different other private schools or districts, then you own it for the remainder of the year, whether or not they're still here. And then if they come back in district from private, which is a little less likely than I believe than it happening collaborative, then they would have a stop end date that you would have to.
I would assume that any of that, we try to do it so it makes sense in terms of like September, June, January, if possible.
And it really depends on how each individual student is doing. So we have seen students come back in like a March timeframe because that was a natural point for them and for their services to come back into district. Sometimes we do say have families and say, we're going to transition your child back in for the summer program and have them get to know the teacher and get to know the classroom and their peers before they transition fully back in September. It really it depends on the student.
And then I think my next thing of this too is like, we have these increases. Sure, you have data and stuff to back it up. I feel like we're shooting at a target with these numbers.
Yeah.
In pitch black, because we actually have no idea at the end of the day. This cost could be $348,000, it could be $200,000, it could be $1 million, correct? Or any of these really, because we really don't know until our students get here, who comes into district, who leaves district. So we are kind of shooting out. It's a tough shot.
That's generally true, right? I mean, other than the contractual obligations, which we can
Correct.
So like,
kind of know. So, but I think Nick's right. If all of a sudden everybody who is taking advantage of these programs left the district, the cost goes to zero. I mean, it's true.
unless they're being transported to another district.
Or we get in 10 kids from a different district and then
it's a very much a moving target, but the numbers are based on,
what you're kind of.
so I'll let Christine explain exactly, that's how we arrived at those numbers.
Exactly, and the reason why that's a $1.1 million increase just in out of district, that's all current students that we have. Anticipating that the exact same students or ones that we have out in placements currently that we are not paying for yet, we anticipate them in FY25. So, and then we already know the OSC increase for next year is 4.69%, which is still, it's not 14, but it's still second highest in the past decade. That's already calculated in, so we know about that. And then we always do an average around 5 for the collaboratives. So that is a small safety net. Some collaboratives come in a little lower, but the rest are current students just getting or ones that we have just like a private student that is in a different community now that we that that community owns, that we know we're gonna own next year, that we don't currently have in there, that placement is for next year.
And, sorry,
Can you find out what the improved private placement increases have been for the past 2 years?
I have. So they have been anywhere from 1% to 1.8, 1.5, 1.4, 1.8, 1.5, 2.3, 1.6, 2.7, 2.2, 2.5, and 14, and then 4.6.
Okay, I mean, I gotta be honest with you, the 1.1 are not that bad.
No, you're right.
That was
Yeah.
Well, and that's why the 14 last year was so surprising to everyone. You go from a place if you're having 1.2, 1.8,
Right.
2.2, and then all of a sudden you see this 14% number. It was a huge, huge issue last year, not just for Norton, but for everyone. It just came out of nowhere. And so now we're now dealing with that. And so, as Christine mentioned, even the 4.69 is a higher number than we're typically used to when it comes to these placements.
and I don't wanna put either one of you on the spot, but I think the entire group here knows. Can we maybe just say it so everyone hears it, that like, these numbers, because they do change a lot, cuts may be made, and then things may be put back into the budget simply off of these numbers alone, never mind all the other budgeted stuff.
Well, if you like, we'll go to page 3,
Yeah.
and kind of talk about the realities of what we're working with here. Thank you, Mrs. Winsberg from afar. So I think for those of us who are familiar with Norton, know that coming forward, even at the first pass with a 12% increase is kind of out of this world. We know that is something that is very much atypical. We've had a lot of conversations with our town manager, Mr. Eunice, and with the treasurer, Mr. Julio, and we've had some really great conversations. And what Mike and James have told us is that, you know, we really should be looking more in the 3 to 5% range. And I asked him if I could share that information with you publicly, because it is public and it is being recorded. And he was fine with us sharing that information out loud. So 12% to 5% is very much a big difference. So Christine and I took a look at 5%. And so the difference between our 12% and potentially a 5% is about $2.4 million of cuts. So Ms. Winsberg, you could scroll down a tiny bit more. As I know you want to say something.
Just remember we're live.
Yeah.
I will apologize ahead of time to anybody who's heard me say this before. At least the last decade. At least the last decade I've been saying this. I don't know if it's the semantics of it or what. I don't understand what they're saying. Are they saying that we should pretend we only need 3 to 5%? Because that makes no sense to me whatsoever. We are presenting a budget that says, here's what we're doing now, here's what we're doing now will cost next year. That is what a budget is. It makes no sense to me to pretend that we need 3%. I don't understand the rationale here. And I've said this before as well. This town thinks about its budget incorrectly. And I see you getting ready to laugh because you hear it every year.
We've had this conversation so many times.
I mean, I can't imagine a world where you would go through your own personal finances this way. Where you would say, okay, you know, we have whatever. We have a mortgage payment. We have electricity, gas to heat the house. We have car payments. We take vacations. We have food. We have whatever. And everything went up 10%. And my salary went up 5%. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pay everything up 5%, and that's it. That makes no sense. Your mortgage company is going to foreclose on your house. You probably should say, we're not taking vacations, right? Rather than just say, hey, let's just pretend our costs are only 5%. You need to sit down and say, okay, what are discretionary costs? What can we do? When we go to the supermarket and buy food, are we buying, whatever, I don't know, the premium Oreos, whatever. Yeah, we're buying ring dings. Well, maybe we don't need ring dings. Maybe we should just buy regular, the regular food that we need for survival. I don't understand why we keep pretending somehow, that we can just say, well, our costs only really went up 5% because that's all we have. That's not the case. At some point, we gotta sit down as a town and prioritize what matters most to us. And I'm not saying it's gonna be the schools, but why don't we at least have that basic conversation? And I would hope that this is not what's being done at the police and the fire level. I hope they're not saying to those guys, hey, pretend that police and fire will be fine with it just 3%. I'd really like to know what they need to have, not what they can have. I think that's an important discussion to have, and we don't ever have that discussion.
So let's do that at the next joint meeting, which is this month. Let's have that conversation, because I think that from my point of view, I don't think they're saying that, it's only 3 or 5%. I think what they're saying is out of this small pie, because as a town, we've decided, live within your means. We've decided that for years, years and years and years. We laid it all out years ago, what departments needed, and still, nope, live within your means. So here we are, right? So the town manager, and listen, we can still have that discussion at a joint meeting, but I think that what they're saying is out of the small pie, this is what we can allocate to each department, because there's many departments that have needs.
And that's fine. I get that we are not gonna get allocated 12%, 10%, 8%. I absolutely get that. But not to tell the town that that is what we need is disingenuous. It is a lot.
Yep.
I didn't go to the joint meeting because I had a work thing, but, there was conversation in the minutes about, we gotta make sure we're transparent. We're anything but transparent. We're the exact opposite. We're actually lying to the town. We're saying, hey, you know what? We don't really need a bunch of stuff. Those English teachers that are gonna cut, yeah, we don't actually need those people. And anybody who's listening at home, I'm not saying we're cutting English teachers, that's an
Just to
example.
clarify.
Just an example. That's the problem here, is we don't actually have that conversation. And say, what's more important to us, A or B? A, B, or C? How do we rank them? What are we gonna do here? Maybe we cut C and give A extra. Maybe we cut C altogether. Maybe we don't have a whatever C is. I mean, you have to at some point have this conversation. And sorry, Sharon, until they ramble, but to say, present a budget that shows this doesn't do anybody any good. It doesn't. It tells us basically, cut your budget ahead of time and then come forward as if everything's okay. That's not the case. Every single department in town should be saying, hey, here's what we need. And that should go to FinCom, and the FinCom should sit down and say, okay, police, you need bulletproof vests, you need ammunition, you need gas to put in your cruisers, et cetera, et cetera. Those things, this is how we rank those in importance. And the schools, you need, whatever, an English teacher, this is where we rank that in importance, et cetera. And then go through and say, okay, what can we afford to have? And how do we rank those priorities? And how do we assess what we have and fit those priorities into places that make sense as a whole, holistically? Not everybody tell me you need 3 to 5% and we'll go with that. And I get Mike and James are not probably saying that. What they're trying to say is, hey, 3 to 5% is realistically what we can allocate because that's basically what we get. So kind of keep your budget in that area. But that's the wrong way to do it. It's simply the wrong way to do your budget. And take it back to your personal finances. You could never run your household that way. Why do we possibly run a town that way?
So let me ask you a question then. So because when each department goes in front of the finance committee, they're doing just that. They're saying what their needs are. And so my question to you was going to be what they're saying. What is our finance committee? What are they looking at?
I think they're saying what their needs are within a 3 to 5% range. They're going over
We certainly aren't.
and saying, and I think we do it right.
Yeah, I
This
think
is my
others, but just from being at other meetings where other town departments have spoken, I definitely think that they are doing what they need, and it just all comes down to
So
this.
I respectfully disagree. I think that maybe they're saying, hey, here's how, what we can do in, within whatever, 3 to 5% range. This is what we can do, but I would be willing to bet over a beer behind them at the bar. Some of these department heads would say, yeah, you know what, really could use X or Y or could use another person on whatever night shift, whatever the case may be. I mean, are they being honest about what they need, or are they telling you what they need in a 3 to 5% range?
Yeah.
I think they're doing a lot.
I haven't been there for a while since Nick and I were involved in Park and Rec. I know back then, Nick, when we would sit in meetings, I mean, it was definitely people were saying what, for the most part, what they needed, but I don't know.
I think this is where it is a little tricky. From a town standpoint, and your personal household standpoint. You have police chief, superintendent, fire chief, the DPW man, or whoever it may be. Their job is to advocate and fight, basically, for whatever they think is the best thing for their budget. It's a very hard checks and balances from a FinCom, who's a appointed board, to look at all these and say, wait a second, well, water department, you don't need that. Schools, you don't need that. Oh, fire department, you definitely need that. We're gonna check that off. So it's a very difficult system to just say, hey, here's our money, here's how it's gonna be separated out. I personally, what I think is the 3 to 5%, that's the reality of what we're going to get. And the last thing that I think the town wants, maybe to your point, maybe we are lying to the town, is all these departments coming in and the fire chief, I'm not picking on Sean Simmons by any means, but him saying, hey, I would love to have 4 more guys on the shift. I would love to have, Brian Clark would love to have 4 more officers and 3 more school resource officers. At the same point, like Terry, to your point, the town has always done this. You have to live within your means. And what are those true needs that we have to have? Have you cut off all the fat out of your budget? Then you get to that table and say, what are your needs? We will fund those needs. Your wants, gonna have to wait. You go on the capital, you do this, you do whatever. As we get free cash into through town. So I think it's a double-edged sword in a way, either way you do it. I think the problem is from our standpoint, not that I'm saying we do it right, wrong, or indifferent. We go and say, hey, we need a 12% increase. The rest of the town's doing, well, we're only doing a 3 or 5%, because that's what our boss, the town manager, and the select board told us to do. And we look like the bad guys because we're saying, we need 12%, and everyone's saying, what the hell? Oh, we got told 3 or 5%.
So I think it's really important.
Can I just, I want to just, so I don't disagree with you that it is a somewhat Herculean task.
Yes.
That, doing what I'm presenting as the way to do it is at least they start the conversation. And yeah, I agree with you that the FinCom probably can't sit here and say, yep, this is A and this is B, this is C. But in a perfect world, they would start the conversation. And then at town meeting, we would have a great representation, a lot of people in the town, and we'd all sit there and debate and say, do we want, the library to be open 7 days a week or 5 days a week? And what does it cost? And where could we allocate those funds somewhere else, et cetera? That conversation should be had. And we're not having it. And this is not, let me be very clear, this is not to criticize the department heads of other departments. I think that, honestly, we have done it this way for so long in this town that they just know to do that. They know that this is what the increase is potentially going to be. And they say, okay, here's what, level services is. They may not say, and again, I'm just using this example, but, Chief Clark may not say, hey, you know what, at night, we really could use another person. We really should have another person there. There's a little bit of a hole there. So he doesn't say we need another person because it doesn't fit in the 3 to 5% budget. So, and it's not because he's not being, honest or whatever. It's because that's how we've always done it as a town. The town has historically been this, okay, everybody bring in your budgets and have them in a controlled fashion, and we'll have no conversation about what matters and what doesn't matter. And this would not be important at all if we weren't slowly bleeding revenue. If our expenses as a town were not slowly, and I guess maybe even now quickly, exceeding our revenue.
Yeah.
We're at the point where we keep talking about the cliff, and our only thought is, well, hey, there's a cliff in front of us, let's just slow the car down, that'll change everything. No. Eventually you go over the cliff. You gotta stop the car and think about where you're going here, maybe change your direction. So that's my, and I agree with you that it is a very big task, and it's not something particularly that the FinCom can necessarily sit down and make, perfect calls on, but maybe start the conversation at least. And I'm not trying to call anybody out on the now. I'm not saying the FinCom's, is doing a bad job. I'm not saying that Chief Clark is not presenting his budget correctly. Hopefully I don't get pulled over on the way home. But, I'm just saying that as a town, why not have a conversation and just say, hey guys, we clearly have a limited revenue. And that's true, right? The revenue that the town raises is finite. So within that finite revenue, let's have a conversation about what matters most, and should we be shifting things? Should we be saying, okay, our priority is A and not B? That's all I'm saying, but I don't recall ever really having that conversation, quite frankly.
So I think this is
for
great.
15 years.
I think this is a great thing to bring up at our next meeting, with the joint meeting. I mean, it's the perfect time for everybody to hear.
That was gonna be my point, is when we look at the town budget as a whole, and we are probably 2/3 of the town budget is the schools, give or take, I'm not a math whiz, call it whatever. But a smaller department might not need 3% or 5%. But so to me, the injustice is, like, if everybody presents a level service budget, every department in town, what does that mean? Because I would say, level services across the board, that means,
Same as what we're doing right now.
well, but my question is, if we take a percentage away from some other department, and now we can maybe get 6% or something like that, or whatever that looks like. What's the pain going to be in other departments versus the school department? Because I'm worried what this $2 million potential deficit looks like. Because we've already said to keep our schools open, that's fully staffed and everything is a lot more than what we're getting. But, so I guess my question, and we're not gonna rely on retirements, because I don't think we're gonna have a ton of those. We're
This does
probably not
include
gonna have.
retirements, yes, it does. Those who have already put in.
So, I mean, I think that's another thing for the joint meeting is, does everybody need 3% to keep the lights on? Every department, and what are because that's the other problem, is we sit here and talk about our budget, but we never see what the other departments' budgets are. Not that we can't take away from them, but a member of the public could if they want to stand up at town meeting and prove their case, but, I think every department's lean, but we see staffing increases in other departments and things like that, but, so do they have staffing needs that need to be met through grants that they're losing, because we clearly are losing grant funds.
So if
And by the way, we're never gonna make up the 2 point.
No,
There's not a chance. I mean,
So if I could address just a couple things that were discussed. Last year we got a lot of pushback from the community that we didn't let people know what cuts were going to mean until it was too late. So I think it's really important for us to show now 12.01% is exactly what we have in our schools currently. That is the number. It's not additional staff. There are not other needs being presented in this budget. For example, both Dr. Marcus and Mr. Higgins have said that they could really use a part-time paraprofessional in all of the kindergarten classrooms. The students are coming in, some of the needs of our students are a little bit different than they were a few years ago. It would be extremely beneficial to have those part-time paraprofessionals there. That is not included in this 12%. Reinstatement of a math and an ELA teacher at the high school was requested this year because class sizes are larger. Those are 2 positions that were not refilled last year with staff left. That is not included here. So those needs will all be communicated.
Still don't have a librarian for this building.
Yes, yes, and we have
At
one
least
person.
for my knowledge.
Right? Yeah, we have one person doing all of the elementary schools. So it's important to know that there were requests that came forward from the principals and from the department heads that are not shown here. And those will be communicated to all of our shareholders as well. I wanted to make sure that we showed you what this looks like and then also have a conversation about if we're not gonna get 12%. Not right? Let's be honest, like we're all realists in some way, shape, or form. So our average over the last 10 years has been 3.7. That has been our average increase. So it's important for us to know, like, what does this mean? And we've sat as, we've met with each of the principals, we've met with the department heads, we've met all as a team. And we'll say, okay, where do we have flexibility? What would we potentially cut? This is going to include, and I'm not using this as a scare tactic, because I know that people will say that that's the goal here. This is the reality, right? Costs have gone up. It will be a reduction in staff. There'll be changes in programming. We'll be looking at, those things that are extra, like the ho-hos or whatever Janessa says, like things that are nice to have in your grocery cart, but not necessarily needed. Like we'll have to look at increasing sports and transportation fees. We'll have to look at the activities that we offer. We have a middle school sports program here that the district is paying for. Like we're going to have to look at some of those things. We'll have to, this is something that we do every year. We move staff out of our budget and into some of our revolving funds, which, that's why we don't have money to pay for the elevator situation, because we're using some of our facilities to pay for staff. We'll be, Dr. Ackerman is not too proud to beg and fills out every opportunity for grants. Like we'll be doing
Thank you. So the next thing that we're going to do, because we've already had a lot of these conversations, we know that 12% is a huge, huge ask. But I think it's really important for people out in the community to know this is nothing extra than what we have right now.
Jen, I wanna just interrupt you for a second.
Please.
And it's semantics, but I think it's important that we're not asking for 12%. And we know we're not gonna get 12%. We're just saying level service is 12%.
Correct.
Understand that. I mean, if every other department in town, their level service falls between 3 and 5%, so be it. Ours does not. And all I'm saying is we should be honest about it. We should not be saying our level service falls between 3 and 5%. It simply doesn't. And there are a number of reasons for that. But this education is a wildly different department than the library or DPW or whatever you'll have. It's extremely different. You know, we have by far and away the most employees, which is probably one of the largest contingencies of any department's budget by far. And we probably have, I would guess, we probably have 3x number of employees the rest of the town has combined. Maybe probably more, right? I know. So it's a person intensive business that has a ton of mandates that get thrown at by the state that we have absolutely no control over. And I don't think any other department is in that position. There's no reason not to just say, this is our level service budget. It is what it is. To quote Bill Belichick, may he enjoy endeavors wherever he ends up.
Yeah.
That's our level service. It's not, we're not asking for 12%. We're saying that's our level service. Now, how do we prioritize things? And if we don't have a conversation, quite frankly, if we don't have a conversation, and every year we just say, okay, 3 to 5% for the schools, then what we're saying is we de facto prioritize education last. That's basically what we're saying.
Or, to your point, having the most expenses, the most personnel, I think historically the schools are not treated as having the most expenses and the most personnel. And that's the reality is, you hold the biggest budget, and I'm sure this is in just about every town in the Commonwealth, that the school departments have the biggest budget, but I would think, 3 to 5% for the smaller departments, that might be more than what level services could be. And we don't know those numbers, and maybe we when we meet jointly, we can get answers to those questions. But, historically, we're not, deemed to have the biggest budget. We're just, this is everybody's budget. And I'm not saying to take away services from another department, but we know off the bat we need 12% because we've shown it openly and transparently, but we just don't know what the other departments are what their level services are.
Right. This is gonna sound very bad. People might know about this. My issue with this, we're looking at a $2.5 million deficit from level service. Back in 2020, we decided to put in $12 million worth of turf fields, knowing the Cliff was coming. That was our priority, to put in turf fields. We knew education was going to struggle. Joe told us for years, Cliff's coming, Cliff's coming, Cliff's coming. COVID essentially saved us a little bit. But our priority, as whether we want to say it's a school committee, school admin, town in general, we decided we're going to put in $12 million fields, knowing $2.5 million was coming, knowing we essentially took cuts last year, knowing next year is going to be worse than this year. Where are our priorities? But if we did or didn't do that, it wouldn't change this number.
Right.
Because that was an exclusion. So
Correct, but we could have done, you can do an exclusion for everything you want. We could have done a $2.5 million exclusion for
we tried to. We tried to. Nobody.
no, we tried to override, so we tried to override it.
Well,
But you could have done.
So that's a very good point, and I'll tell you what the problem is there. And this is another thing I always have a complaint with is we constantly use one-time money for operational expenses.
Correct.
So an exclusion works great for a year, and then the next year you have to come back and say, hey, we need that exclusion again. That's an override. You're basically saying you want an override because what you either want an override or perpetual exclusion. You can't. It's semantics. It's the same thing.
No, not really, because an override is a lifetime, never,
but
That's actually not true. You can do what's called an underwrite, but that's
It's
a.
on override.
But you don't have
Oh,
to
you can do
put
an
up to
underwrite.
that.
You can actually lower your taxes.
But anyway, like this school is paid for, not obviously we have state granting and everything else, but this was a 25-year or 30-year debt school. Everyone got whacked in taxes. It's now, I think, paid off or very, very close to being paid off, and it's done. It's off people's taxes. But, you know, so there is a major difference there. But what I'm saying is, it's like, I also don't think we've set ourselves up historically, and I'm not blaming anyone here, but I don't think we've set ourselves up to make it so like, hey, we're like, I think we need to get on the same page as far as our priorities, and I think to Sherry's point, getting back into with the select board and the FinCom, saying why we're doing this, where we're at, you know, is the other town, you know, chiefs and managers and everything else looking at it from the standpoint of like, oh, where's it going up to 3 to 5%? But actually, for us to be level service, we need 10%. You know, I don't know. We don't know what they're doing, and without really talking to FinCom and the select board and even the town manager to a certain degree, I feel like we're just sitting here looking at numbers saying, this is our level services. What if the police need the level service and there's still 25%? You know, and then there is only so much money to go around. You know, but at some point, the 3 to 5% is reality because what is it? 3.74% we've gotten over the last decade.
3.7,
Which
What
is
did
a
we
good
get?
number.
What did we get last year?
4.12.
Well, so we got a little bit more last year historically than we have over the last decade.
And we historically get more than most other departments. I will say that. This is not me saying we don't get, we don't get enough. So, I just want to say really quickly. So you're actually kind of proving my point, or not proving my point, but you're saying what I'm saying, but you're just using a different example. So what happened in that situation was we said to the town, hey, are you willing to pay extra in taxes for turf fields, a senior center, and a new town hall? And the town had a discussion and said, yep, we sure are. And they were willing to do it. Let's just have the same discussion about a budget in general. I mean, that's all I'm saying. Right? So you're saying what I'm saying. You're saying you want the same discussion. I don't think that was an issue with our priorities. That was the town telling you our priority is, yes, we'll pay for a turf field. No, we won't pay for an English teacher. That's what they're telling us.
We've done this a number of
Yeah,
times,
we
and
have.
listen,
Trust me.
I'm on my way out, so I'll sit back and I'll let you run with this stuff as much as you want, because we have done this. And we have come together, you know, one of the last 2 override attempts, we had departments say, what are your needs? We had it all spelled out, and people said no. So, I mean, I do take it a little bit personally.
Well, I think the override number was considerably less
Yeah.
than the number
Yes, it is.
for the 3 projects.
And we kept saying,
by
oh,
a factor of like 10, it was like 1/10 of that. And they were still like, hell no.
right,
Well, and I think, you know, 2 points to make, speaking of, you know, historically, what would those overrides look like for budgets now? I mean, you're talking, there'd be a lot more money in the budgets because of that.
Of course.
And to your point, I mean, we don't always need to go to that. We could underfund or under, you know, but, and I, you know, when we talk about these other projects that are going on, I would hedge a bet that we don't have increased costs based on our project. You know, whereas operational costs for 2 other buildings are gonna be a lot more than what our
We
fields
actually have
are.
decreased costs.
Yeah, I mean, you know, our project, we can generate a little bit of revenue with rentals. We're not, the other buildings, you know, they're gonna need staffing, they have lighting, they have all these other needs that are going to have to increase their operational costs. And we don't have to theoretically have operating costs increase because we have an option to offset. I mean, I don't think there's gonna be, no one's gonna rent a town hall or pay for space, or maybe in the senior center, there's that option at some point, but, you know, I don't think it's, you know, I want this, not this. I think it's the way things were presented. When we talked about overrides, there was not a united front from everybody. And when we talked about the debt exclusion for, you know, the high school historically, and then these, you know, these 3 building projects, there was a united front from everybody in town. Just about every board was like, we're on board. And then was that calculated risk of, do we separate these out? Do we put them in 3 together? And those are made by our town leaders, and they did pass, and we're forever grateful they passed. And I'm sure once the other projects, they'll look good as well. You know, but if we're still circling, you know, the drain with our finances, at some point we have to take a hard look at what this looks like, and, you know, whether or not we have to lead the charge and say, this is what we have to do, or we continue to have these joint meeting conversations. that's what we're gonna have to do. I mean, we can circle back around, however many times, but this is the reality. And we've shown what the reality is for our department.
And I think just to circle back, Nick, I think to say that we have to get the priorities straight, with all due respect to that comment, I think we've had our priorities straight. We've been saying this for a very, very long time. And it's, the town has spoken time and time again of what their priority is. So I don't know what more we could have done sitting in these seats. We've been open and honest with what our budget is, even though people think we hide stuff or, lie or whatever. We have been very open and honest with things, and we have said this for a long time. I don't know how, I don't know.
So
Trustee?
I guess my last final question on this, when we talk about announcing what this looks like, I know, privately we've had conversations, I've had them. We announced too late what the cuts were going to be for last year. Like our last meeting of the school year was, what can we do?
Right.
Well, and we all sat and said, can't really do anything at this point. So I guess my question to you all is, when do we kind of fill in the blanks of what does this reduction in staff look like? What do these fees look like? So I guess, because I don't want to be sitting here our last meeting before town meeting and saying, we still don't know. Or, so I think we need to, if we say the reduction in staff is going to be X positions, the fees have to be raised by X. I think we need to be very aware of what that looks like and get out in front of that early. And, the townspeople can see
I
what this
agree.
is
I
going to
think,
look like.
we've had a lot of conversations as a leadership team about what can we do, what flexibilities do we have. I think right now, we don't have specific things that we're looking at. I mean, realistically, let's be honest, we're looking at 15 plus staff members across the district, and that could be any position, any unit, any role. I would say it's at least 15 positions. I would say that we're, probably looking at some significant cuts at the middle school in terms of extracurricular activities for students, looking at increasing fees, but those are all things that we kind of have to go back and fine tune. Right now, with the next steps, we're looking at class sizes, we're looking at our school schedules. Our school schedules, are we getting the most bang for our buck out of the way we run our day? Like, would a change in schedule allow us to reduce some staffing positions? Chrissy and I are going through a line by line, like what do we budget versus what are we actually spending? So we're going through all of those pieces, and we'll be giving you guys more information. But I think everything has to be laid out earlier for our community so people really know what this means. And we always hear that Norton always saves the day. We've had the ability and the flexibility through COVID funds over these last few years to ask our grants to be able to save the day, because we use that money for all positions instead of using it for one time. We don't have any more money to save the day.
So with like those ESSER funds, for example, they created some new positions, would those be like one of the first ones on the chopping block since we don't have that money anymore?
Those will be things that we'll have to look at and say, okay, what are the roles that we paid for with these grant funds? What is the impact they're having on day to day? Are those things that need to go, or are there other things that are less important that could potentially go?
This might be your priorities.
Yes,
This
prioritizing.
might be a historical question too, but like, obviously we've got grants for God knows how long. Like, do we have like a historical aspect of like 2013, we got this grant to fund this position, and now we've just incorporated that into the budget? That like, is that another area to look at in terms of like, okay, what grant money did we have? We got lucky, I'm making this date up and all the time up, but in 2014, we actually easily incorporated that in. We had a teacher retire, we found $50,000 to fund that position, that's what we did. Do we have any historical data that kind of says?
So the last set of grants that would have given us another staffing position were the ARA grants, which were early 2000s. And so this is me going in the way back, like my own historical knowledge. I know at that time we had some positions that were created with that funding. Dr. Yancey was still here at that time. I would have to really go back and kind of check.
I don't
I'm
really need to go back.
99% sure a lot of those were,
That's why I had the microfilm.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I'm like-
So, like,
Yeah.
my own
5 to 10
historical
years.
perspective,
Yeah.
that was the last set of grants that we would have received. Title I is a entitlement grant. We receive that every single year. That funding amount kind of ebbs and flows from year to year. And it's actually based off of, our student poverty rates here in town, which we got, I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at the spreadsheet today, it's actually increased. So we'll probably see a tiny little bit more funding from that grant next year. But those are staffing positions. Those are our reading specialists and interventions that are supporting students. So that's great. We'll take a little bit of that money out of the budget if we do that. But
So I assume we have the final numbers for what the state budget was, including the cuts that the governor made. Do those affect the schools at all?
so the $375 million worth of cuts, we were told that they will not be impacting state, school and municipal budgets at this time. However, we've also been told that the governor's budget for next year will be significantly reduced because of just less revenue than
Don't worry, got the millionaire's tax on.
Well, I mean, I just,
Yeah, never gonna see a penny.
there was 600 million earmarked for another program, 3 million cut from one, so it's just.
which is so frustrating.
So,
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay, that's fine, I'll wait. my
I
turn.
saw it in her face.
I know,
I knew she wanted to say something.
I can wait, it's not a big deal. No, I just had two things I wanted to say. One, the budget really, was one area that I was nervous about, and as far as just understanding it. And so I appreciate all of the paper and all of the graphs and the line items, and I think from hearing from community members as well, they're also appreciative of it, and like, I think that you are presenting it in a way that people can understand and see where you're coming from. And so I hope that, it continues to be received well. But then I also had a question, isn't the town required to spend a certain amount of their budget on the schools, like a certain percentage?
Yes, net school spending. Yes, we are technically meeting that requirement.
Right.
We meet our net school spending requirement as a community. The way that is, and this is something that, as you guys know, when we talked about me taking this position, I'm like, I gotta really work on budget. That's something that I really need to kind of figure out exactly how that is determined. It's based on what the town can afford, that ability to pay. We meet that budget. One of the other documents that I'm going to share with you hopefully next week is our per pupil expenditures. So looking at what are we spending per student as compared to those like districts that the Department of Education says are comparable to us, even though
They're not.
I mean, they are and they're not at the same time, as well as the TBL, which is our athletic league. Where do we fall in there? And it's also based on the state average. Where is Norton based on the state average? So it's just another piece of information for you to have
Yeah, and net
in your
spending,
back pocket.
net spending to me is very archaic way of looking at things. Anyway, it's saying, one, the state's mandating you to spend this much money. If the schools are doing really well, we're testing great, our kids going to college, we're doing everything, and we spend $3 million less than we require. Well, that has no bearing, it's kind of dumb at the end of the day. The second thing is every school, including that, I believe, spends somewhere between usually 12 to 28% higher than what the net spending amount is. I think last time I looked, we were at like 16 or 17.
I was gonna say, I think we're at 12.
Yeah, so like, again, like, so it's kind of an arbitrary number, and again, it's just the state making up a random thing based on some random formula that, I don't know, to me, it really doesn't have any bearing. If you can spend less money and have a well-versed school system in your, sending kids out and everything's going well, why does it matter what the dollar amount is?
We're in the right spend less money.
Yeah, okay, well,
We're
yeah,
about to spend less money.
I'll never defend the state, but I will say like that the net school spending is not meant to be, here's what it costs to educate your kids. And I used to have a pretty good, a link to a pretty good website that explained everything, including the formula. The formula is based on a lot of different things. It's based on like your Title I, like all this other stuff. Like there's a bunch that goes into it. So I'll never defend them, but that's kind of where they're at, and you're 100% right, everybody spends over it, so the idea that we're spending more than that is not somehow like, oh, look, we're doing great. That is not a measurement of doing great, trust me. So the second thing that I was gonna say was, and I'm debating saying this because, I'm not sure if it's gonna be, it'll turn the public off, but with respect to getting information out there earlier, I'm not seeing how it matters right now. And the reason I say that is because 2.4 million, we're not gonna pick that up. It doesn't matter if people are furious about the cuts that are coming, or if they're absolutely apathetic. It's whatever, wherever you land on that spectrum, it doesn't matter. Because there's no way for the town to make up that difference. They simply can't. I mean, 2.4 million, I don't know off the top of my head, but police and fire, their budgets are in that area. I mean, and they're the only other town entities, I believe, that are even at even at the ballpark of that. So unless we're saying, hey, we're gonna cut the fire department, this department, there's no way to make that up. So this is not a conversation about like, hey, these are the cuts, so if you care, you should get out there and vote or whatever. That's not the case at all. Like, we can be very clear about the cuts. I mean, last year we had a long conversation about cuts that were made. People came in afterwards, after the cuts were made, basically, and were like, hey, we didn't know, and whatever. And I believe I said at that meeting, well, that's on you, because we certainly mentioned it. We talked about it, ad nauseum, and nobody showed up at the town meeting and stood up and said, I'm against this, and here's why, because we're gonna cut something to me. It wasn't important until that, that teacher was essentially not here anymore. I mean, I'm not sure that getting the information out there earlier is gonna change anything. And I guess I'm going to answer my own credo that we should at least start the conversation. We should start the conversation, but just people should be aware as we get this information out earlier and, more often and more widely dispersed. We really can't change things for this coming year. The budget for this coming year is going to be between 3% and 5%, and it's going to be a massive cut. So
Here's my one thing though. I kind of respectfully disagree. The only reason why.
I don't think it's going to be a massive cut.
What I'm saying,
Maybe we're going to get 6% next year.
It's donated.
It's really optimistic.
But if our budget, again, everyone thinks we're the ones that set the budget. We pick it, and this is what happens, and the town rides off at sunset. It's the taxpayers who pick the budget. They get to decide. They get to decide where their money's going. All we do is take the information that Jen gives us and says, okay, yes, this makes sense, or hey, could we move money here? Maybe we do have a system, whatever we need to do. My thing is like, if you can get that out sooner, now town meeting comes around. Someone has it in their hand saying, hey, this is what the schools are looking at cutting. Maybe someone does get up and say, wait a second here. I know the schools are short 2.4 million. I know we're not going to be able to fund 2.4 million without cutting the water department, whatever. However, we need to find some money. We need to move some stuff around here. We need to put an extra $1 million into the school budget to make sure we don't lay off any teachers and keep bus fees and athletic fees. I feel like if we give them that for town meeting, we've done our job. We said to you,
I would agree with that.
here it comes.
Right.
We're doing what we're obviously using, pretty much 95% probably of Jen's recommendations of, hey, this is what we think is going to cut, this is where we think we're going, this is the direction we're going in. We don't have a choice. We can't find $2.4 million for you. Take it up with the town, and your taxpayers can decide on how you want this budget spent. How you want that.
And I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. My point was more like the number is so high that even if we were to move money, you're not going to come close to this. And I'm just looking at this, and I'm thinking about this. I'm just noticing that we're assuming a 5% increase, which is probably not likely.
We're
So-
positive thinkers.
So the number, look at Nick. Nick is like, so the 2.4 million is probably actually low as well.
Okay.
So just be aware of that. But that might be, yes, we should absolutely have 100% have the conversation. And I don't mean to say that we should go in there and start cutting other departments, but we should have the conversation. That's absolutely what I'm saying.
And I think from a transparency standpoint, from us five sitting up here too, the earlier we get this out, you're going to have people who want to come in and talk about whatever they think is important in their schools.
Yes.
And if they're willing to come down here and say, hey, we need to put in, let's use English, because we're probably not going to cut English out of our budget. I'm really big on English, and we want to keep English in these schools, and we think you guys got to find money from somewhere else and cut somewhere else. at least we can hear from them, and then maybe we say, hey, you know what, Jen, maybe we look at doing X, Y, and Z.
We're at that.
We're out there. I don't want to say something to you.
Like, at town meeting historically, the budget, I can think in my
The fastest
20
one.
years in town.
Yeah.
The budget has changed once on town meeting floor, and that was the year we outsourced.
Cafeteria.
Cafeteria, and,
Yep.
and we as a committee had to stand up and make that change,
Yeah.
and that was a change in personnel and healthcare.
Yeah, the change was minor, we requested the money,
Yeah.
put into our account, because we were cutting a bunch
So-
of people, and so there was actually not a tax savings, insurance, whatever the term
So
is.
historically, so at least if we're getting information out there, maybe someone says, well, if we take 30, 30, and 30, the schools can have another 100,000. I don't know what that number looks like, but historically, we don't get that number out there. Like, we go through, we say, here's our number, and, you know, we're given a number by our town leaders and saying, you gotta stay within this, whether or not that's your means or not, this is a number you're staying in between. And then we go to town meeting and, you know, 75 people show up and warrant article number 16, that's the town budget. I, yes, no, and there's no discussion. So at least we're saying, here's your information, do what you will with it. But your floor is at town meeting to make a change if you decide as a taxpayer.
So I just want to leave you guys with one last thought before we move on. These 3 documents that we shared with you tonight as part of like our budget update are public documents now because they have been here at school committee and they're part of our public record. It is my plan to share them with our staff tomorrow and with our families next week, along with a budget survey for our staff and our families to tell us what matters to them. It is something that we stole, for lack of a better word, from colleagues in other districts that have already done this, and we tweaked it to fit more in. And so we're asking people, like, we're going to show people, like, this is the reality of what we're dealing with here. This is what a level service budget is. These are the realities. What are your priorities for our schools? And then we're going to use that information to help us in these conversations, as well. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys are aware.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Right.
Brilliant.
I think that, you know, what we're doing, starting the conversation early is great. I think that, you know, Nick, I would love to see somebody get up at town meeting, but I think that the process to normal townspeople is so overwhelming and they don't really understand it, that they just sit there silently and hope that the people sitting in these seats.
The whole
know
thing
what
is
they're
that,
doing. Right, exactly. I think it's intimidating to most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Don't tell me it was a good time.
Seriously, excellent. That's all you needed to hear. All right, so should we move on? Discussion on upcoming school committee meeting dates.
So typically we have our budget workshop in, February-ish. We need to have all of our budget documents, our final, voted recommendation, including the public hearing before that, by March 8th to town hall. So, we had initially looked at February 3rd as our workshop day. But open to see if that works for people.
Don't watch that.
March 3rd is too late because we
That's
need
not
to have it, I think originally when the calendar was set, it was March 8th, but it's too late for us to get it, done. So Christine and I are proposing February 3rd.
Each in the morning.
Yeah, so we would start as early as everyone's willing.
So,
For those of you who are new to the process, it's a rip-roaring good time. Vanessa brings munchkins.
I will certainly not this year because I cannot make February.
Okay.
Did we do a night last year?
I think we did
I
that.
don't know that we did it last year.
We didn't do it last
I
year.
don't know if they did the workshop last
Spread it
year.
out over a few.
Yeah,
Okay.
we didn't have an actual workshop because essentially we were saying, this is the budget, and we voted on it without, you know, having a ton of discussion, which it sounds like that's where we're kind of at this year. Well, I mean, we know what the numbers look like, we know what the numbers are. I mean,
I mean, the one thing that might be interesting or valuable is to have a conversation about fees and programs and other things if we're going to have to put something forward to the community. But that's up to you.
So I would rather, I think I would rather go spend 6 hours on Saturday and get through a budget than be talking about it 2 hours at a time over 3 different.
It's definitely not 6 hours, but
Yeah, yeah. Yes, but you know what I'm saying? Because a lot of,
Like brunch.
yeah, I would rather do it on a Saturday, Sunday afternoon, and if we can, everyone can make it, wherever we can do it, I would definitely be more inclined.
I mean, we're pretty open, so you guys tell us a date that works and
So if it's a Saturday or a Sunday, your options are basically February.
That's your
Approval meeting. Is it
at
really?
Super Bowl?
Sunday the 11th.
Yeah, it is.
So,
Yeah.
well, we
Well,
can
you
do
can do
it
it.
early.
You can do it early.
January's over and we're up.
We could do
We can
nine
do that.
AM.
So
Right.
I will say this, and I think I've said this, I think I said this past, I think I said when we were talking about originally. I don't think it is crucial that I am there for that.
Okay.
I feel like I can get up to speed on the budget pretty quickly. Particularly if it is going to be more of a presentation and less of a discussion. With respect to discussion of fees and increasing fees, et cetera, I think that is a discussion we should have after we know where we're at. Not as part of the budget itself. Speaking for myself, my appetite to do that is very low. However, we are probably going to be in desperate times here very soon. So we may have to consider that, unfortunately. And I know Sherry, at least you and I, and probably Dan, Justine, and Nick, I don't know your opinions on this, but we've historically kind of been against doing that, but we may have to do that. I think it moves us to wait until we actually know where we stand.
But I think my counterpoint to that minimalist one is, if we're looking at the budget and setting up with the budget, we would need to at least have a discussion on, if we raise the fee to X, we would raise this amount of money in the budget. So while the budget, so for example, if we raise the fee to $300, that adds X to the budget, which would then have to be part of that budget
Right,
discussion.
so if we're doing that, then what you're saying is, we are raising fees prior to submitting our budget, because that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna raise
Raising, we would
fees.
say we're raising fees to see what we can make up of $2.1 million.
Well, we know what we generally know what we can make up, right? Like if we can extrapolate. whatever.
We have that information already.
Yeah, you know the information, so it's just a question of, do we wanna go forward and say, our level service budget is this, or do we wanna say, our level service budget is this minus whatever we think we can raise the fees? So I guess you're essentially saying, because if you submit that budget, then you de facto have your vote on that. So I think makes more sense, unless we really are like all in on raising fees. If we're all in on raising fees, then, if that's a fait accompli, then so be it. But I don't want to necessarily get to that until.
Would it be valuable for us to bring you some information at another meeting to share, an increase from X to Y? This would bring in this as an estimated revenue?
Well, I think it's one of those things where if we're talking about a 2.4, whatever, I don't have that, I turned it away because I was disgusted by it. If we're looking at fees to raise X, I don't know that, so I guess what would the timeline be on that? If our budget's going to be this with the money we get from the town, then I would think raising fees would be our way to say, we're trying to gain more from that 2.4. So we may not have to have that discussion, because if we raise fees, that's not really going to the budget we're going to get from the town. That would be our own internal budget, because that would go into.
You'd be raising fees instead of cutting a teacher.
But that's like I said, that's more our internal process budget than, because the town's gonna.
It wouldn't matter because the money's fungible, so I think every sport,
You will say,
but it's true though, because every sport loses money, I think almost every sport loses money. So if we raise fees, we're just basically, we're taking those fees and we're paying, we're using them to pay for the sports, and then that money comes out of there and goes to pay for the teacher, so it doesn't matter how we do it, doesn't matter how we account for it, it's net, it's gonna be the same, so we're either saying our budget is X or it's X minus the fees, that's where we're at. But, and I get it, I'm at the point where I realize we're probably gonna have to do the fees, I understand that. So,
I guess we start with numbers and go from there.
Yeah.
Just tread lightly.
do you guys have a sense of, if we raise fees, are we talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions?
Almost 10,000.
Yeah, so it's
It would be like, you're changing a teacher for fees. Right,
Okay.
a new PE teacher.
Yeah, I don't,
And one
It's-
other,
I guess I'm-
previously impact part of it.
Yeah, that's 100% what's gonna happen, right? Because boosters and parent organizations have to start fundraising more, and guess who's gonna pay for that? Yeah. As we've talked about, yes,
A million times.
yeah, in terms of its parent tax. All right, so should we look at February 11th then in the morning? Did that work for everybody?
So something.
Yes.
It seems enough.
no, okay. You're not here?
Sorry.
Can we do it night? We do it on Wednesday night? I don't know.
I went 14.
I don't.
I have no plans.
I got it right there.
You bet that's wrong, yeah. He's a wonderful guy. We never say that.
You're live.
Yeah, we-
I know he's not watching it, but it's fine. Do we do it like the sixth, Tuesday the sixth?
Could we, I can make a bucket, everybody can do that, on Wednesday would be better.
See, I can't do Wednesdays because Josh has games on
I can,
Wednesdays.
Tuesday will work, sometimes I have a little bit of time.
Bring your little ones. And that's pretty much it.
I'll probably join us together.
That's a night, I won't bring- it's-
Okay.
I'll bring martinis.
Yeah, the sixth works. What time? Six?
February sixth, is that what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Tuesday? Perfect, that's good.
What was the time, 6?
We'll do 6 o'clock.
Should we just have it central or have it here?
We used to go to Central.
Do it Central. Yeah,
Little Lord's Pizza or something.
yeah, that's great. We'll all chip
We have
in.
to chip in.
Yeah, we have to pay for it ourselves. District can't afford it. Yeah. Thank you.
What are we calling this, budgeting meeting, basically?
Yeah, it's budget workshop. I'll send it all to you. I'll send it invite to all of you.
Well, I mean, so I wondered if location wise, we maybe just say the Yale Library in case we happen to get a crowd.
Sure. Yeah, that is a good idea.
Because I know we can't change it once.
Yeah, that's a good help meeting. Yeah. All right,
You
so
never
we got
know.
library.
Been doing this 15 years, I've yet to see one person.
I know,
I think one year we had like one or two.
Really?
No,
Right.
one, we had 3 people, but they were trying to earn their licensure for principal.
Oh, you might be.
They were like,
They're in the wrong room.
nobody had
They're
shown.
in the wrong room. Halfway through, they're like, wait, this isn't Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, first reading of surplus items policy.
All right, this is coming to you by request. This is a policy that will take a look at any items that we have that are left over. It really, follows the statutory requirements, that are put forth. So this is a first read tonight. And any comments or concerns or things you would like to adjust, that'd be done.
I had 2 thoughts when I read it. The first is, it talks about disposal of things that are estimated at certain values, X, Y, Z, whatever, 10,000, under 10,000. And as I'm looking through it, if something is estimated at under 10,000, but it actually starts, the bidding starts coming through at over 10,000. Do we need to then change the way that we're doing it? Because our estimation of the valuation is not correct. That's my first question.
Is the
Does that
question,
make sense? Okay, I have this gavel right here, and I think this thing is now worth, it's worth $5,000 because
is
Sherry's.
your question who judges the value?
And it's, no, that's another question. That you, go to my second one.
Okay.
So I think that's worth $5,000.
Yep.
And I go through the disposal of items under $10,000 process. And the first person that comes in and says, I'll pay you $20,000 for it. Sherry used that gavel, that's $20,000 a minute. That thing's gonna be historically valued. Do I now say, well, hold on, I'm using the wrong process? I should be using the process of those things that are estimated over $10,000. Because my estimation of valuation is $8,000. This is
I don't know.
this is just, this first reading, so it's just.
Yeah,
food for thought.
all right, food for thought.
So, and my second thought was, and this is kind of akin to what you said, and the whole, discussion of this originally, this doesn't actually answer the original question that we had. So the problem is there's no valuation clause.
Yeah.
It just says, okay, this is valued at this is valued at that, this is valued at that, and this is valued at worthless. I think, and Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but the original reason that you wanted to do this was because how are we determining the value of zero? In this case, there was a discussion of, we thought something was worth zero, and Nick said, well, we don't know it was worth zero. So there should be some clause in there about, whatever, a prudent person or best faith efforts to determine value lead you to believe it's at, at a value of zero. Because without that, it doesn't really solve the problem. And I think you were originally.
So it talks about the director of financial review, the written recommendation, make a final determination of its merit. So
So do we?
And that's exactly what you did
Right.
before, but
there was, we deemed it as not valuable.
right,
versus,
but,
yeah,
but to Nick's point, we
Yeah.
didn't know. And I think that was kind of to codify, how do we determine that it has zero value? Am I wrong? Because if I'm wrong, then this is great, pass it. But if I'm not wrong, I think that's, right, you were trying to say like, hey,
How do we get?
we just said. oh,
how do we
it's
determine
zero.
it? Right.
So there should be something in there, even if it's, it probably has to be somewhat, there has to be some vagary to it, because if it's super specific, it would almost be impossible to prove. But there should be something in there about the valuation of something at zero, like how,
All right.
what is the basis of valuation? It can't just be so-and-so says it's worth nothing. Because that doesn't
Because
solve for.
you'll find a so-and-so that says it's
Right,
something.
exactly.
Because that's the thing, is like, if it's a surplus vehicle, well, that might be worth it for a company to retrofit. So I mean, that's where you get into this, we might say it's worth 5,000 because we don't need it, but to someone else,
Right.
oh, I'll give you 5,000 for that, but then I'm gonna.
If you leave it on eBay long enough, someone will pay something. Like, that's just the reality. So there should be something akin to that.
Okay.
It doesn't move too much.
I think typically when it comes to like auction surplus, say with a vehicle, for example, it's like, based on comps that you do, that vehicle will be worth less than 10,000. It doesn't run won't be good for like different things. So then when you go to put it on public auction, if you're right, the value did come up over 10, which it wouldn't, but it did, then
Nowadays,
you
it
take
might.
it back and probably reassess.
And a car is probably a lot easier to value.
Right.
Yes,
Um,
and say,
And so bringing us back to like the original issue was, we need to have some codified way to say, okay, this is why we value this at zero, and that's what I'm getting at. And it doesn't have to be solved tonight. I'm just,
Is it a way though, like you brought up getting 3 quotes for something, is it getting 3 estimates or,
Yeah, it could be.
something like
It
that,
could be.
like,
that's,
instead of just having
Yeah.
one person's opinion,
absolutely,
have,
yeah.
maybe
And,
feel like that's our number.
Typically, for other things that we have to get rid of, it's much easier to make that determination. So like, one of the big things that often comes up is old curriculum, old textbooks, right? So you have a textbook from 1998, it's world geography, like, let's talk about how much that has changed since 1998. And you go online, there is a resource that you can use to see what the value is, you can see if other districts are using it. It's very easy to determine that there is no value there. So that's an easier process than some other things that have come up. So, why are you laughing at?
98 was a good year for World
It
War.
was.
I was actually thinking about an episode of Modern Family where they had these like old magazines, they were saw out of date, they were like worldwide events. And
I have to say, before we had our
Some
elementary
old
library, there were
textbooks,
some
like-
books like that in our
I was thinking, wonder
library.
like what these old
Sure.
textbooks saying,
Yes,
don't go too far here, fall off the edge.
I'm assuming did we run this by legal yet?
yes.
And I'm assuming this isn't all about running these published
Oh, gosh, no.
districts and everything else.
As you said, recreated the wheel in different ways.
I guess my initial thoughts when I first sat down and read it was like, this is a lot.
Mhm.
Like I just, it's kind of not where I was kind of going with it in a way. I'm okay with it being laid out this way. I don't have an issue with it. It's pretty self-explanatory, if you will. But I think to Dinez's point, like, there's just a few things on here that I'm like, well, who is that for us? So like, chief procurement officer, who makes,
Christine.
yeah, but like, who makes that final determination? and again, maybe to the Sherry's point, is it, you know, if we're unsure of something, we shouldn't just get rid of it. You know, we know if textbooks are old and we run them through the system and it's, you know, we're getting nothing for these things and it's gonna cost us more money to ship them somewhere than we're gonna make, how could we throw them
And
away?
no one wants to come and pick them up.
Exactly. So like, I guess to my point is like, I think you just need a little bit more in terms of like, who makes the final call? And then ultimately, what is like DPW? Like, what is their, you must have something. What does the fire department do? Have you looked at anything else in town? Because I think it would also be viable for everybody to kind of have something similar to other departments in town that like, hey, this is what the school's following, this is what fire department follows, and it kind of matches. And again, we're gonna have different things, obviously, than a fire truck.
Process,
You know, but the process should be generally marked so together to kind of make it easier.
I
for
don't
everybody.
think individual departments handle their surplus, so the surplus program goes through the select board, it's declared as surplus, then I assume it either goes to the town accountant or the town manager.
Mhm.
So like Chief Clark's not saying I have these 50 radios that are surplus, so I mean, it's probably either the town manager or the treasurer that goes through that, you know, municipal.
Correct, but then it goes to the select.
Yes,
All they do is declare it
So
surplus.
technically speaking, though, where the government body
yes.
details, should it also come to us to sign off on that piece of paper, just like the select board does for other surplus accounts?
Probably not, because they're the ones that make all the financial decisions in the town. We make them for the school, but it's still town property.
Yeah, but you don't have,
Yeah, I don't think it's that crazy to do that. I think there's some merit to have it come before us, if it's considered surplus.
So it does talk about
If
the
we're saying it's
governmental
like-
body,
I actually think
like
we have
that
to
would be
do
you.
Yeah.
That is a school
Correct.
thing. I think you wanna do that when there's money involved, right? When there's a determined value. I think when there's not a determined value, it may be valuable for us to put a memo together and say, we're getting rid of these 1998 world geography books. Through this process, we've determined that there's no value, and just perhaps that way, because otherwise I would say.
Here's the thing though, if
You
there
think
is
the opposite
money
is
attached
true?
to it, we're not getting that money.
I think
You
that's.
don't care?
Why would, because it's gonna go to the town.
why?
It's not gonna come to us.
It goes back to the general, back to the general
Back
fund.
to that general fund.
It's like Medicaid.
Yep, I actually think the opposite, the reason is because the process for things of assumed value has some check and balance to it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Oh, super zero.
if there's zero value, and that's kind of what we're talking about, right? It's like in the ethics, so there's zero value if the next person after Christine said, oh, it's not Christine, the next person after Christine is really shifty and says, hey, that new snow blower we just bought is worth nothing. It's surplus. And I'm gonna, get rid of it. I'm gonna give it to my cousin who, needs a snow blower, and so then it's like, oh, okay, so then shifting happened. That should come before us first. We can say, wait a minute, that snow blower has a value of $550 and
Totally agree.
so,
And unfortunately, I think it's going to be great more work for us, sign off on stupid.
It is.
But I also think, in the world of checks and balances, not, and again, I don't want to pick on Christine, but if Christine says, hey, that pile of dirt was worth nothing, then Christine has, 15 yards of loom in her driveway. Well, so, yeah. And again, like that's, and then obviously, we don't expect people to do that, we don't want people to do that naturally, but that is our job. Our job is to make sure that that's not happening, because it does happen all the time,
All right, so we will, make some tweaks to this and, bring it back to you guys for, okay, thank you.
All right, review and vote changes to the 24-25 school calendar.
So this was actually voted on last year, which is, great, March 23rd of 2023. What we've done since then is we added the exam dates for high school and just, the, professional development early releases as well. So this is a complete calendar for you for the 24-25 school year.
And we don't see this changing.
Nope, the one thing that we did do is we have the election day is a no school day in November. So that avoids that issue.
Okay,
That's the presidential.
That's a presidential election, yes.
okay. Anybody have any questions, comments? Okay, is there a motion to approve the 24-25 calendar?
So,
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Oh, yeah, sorry, superintendent goals.
All right, so, when I presented these goals to you all at the beginning of the year, we talked about that, the fact that I would come back, at the midpoint of the year and share an update with you, which I have. And I'll kind of go through them in a little bit more detail for public. We also talked about the fact that the committee wanted to do the, evaluation at the end of the year prior to the springtime election. So what we'll do is, I'll probably share that with Sherry, probably mid-March. That way we can do that and do that publicly before, the election as well. So that's still,
Yeah, I think that was the
Would like
biggest
to
thing
do?
is historically, if we have a new member,
yeah. it
we're
makes it-
talking about it and they're like, what is all this? I didn't
Yeah,
fill it
yeah.
out. Or I remember, you know, I think my first year I didn't even fill it. Like, I don't know what you guys are.
No,
And
Yeah.
So I think to get it done before the election's a good idea.
So I'm just giving you a super quick update, on the goals and how they're going so far. The first goal was all around the effective entry and direction setting, which is the superintendent's entry plan. So the initial entry plan was presented to school committee on September 14th and included an overview of the entry process, the areas of focus and how information will be collected and analyzed. Since July 1st, I have engaged in a series of interviews with community leaders, staff and administrators in Morton Public Schools, attended parent, board, and CPAC meetings, met with student groups, conducted surveys with students, staff, and families, and completed residency days at all schools. Data collected from these interactions has been an integral component of the entry process. In addition to reports from these interviews, data such as local assessments, enrollment trends, special education reports, historical budget documents, as well as student data by subgroup demographic. Together, this information is creating a picture of Morton Public Schools, the strengths of our schools and the areas that we need to focus on in order to move forward as a school community. And I will be presenting my full report of entry findings to you on March 14th. If that date is not good, I can tweak it, just let me know. The second goal was focusing on maintaining momentum during the transition. And it talked about the way that I'd be working with our principals and other administrators, making sure that teaching and learning is our focus. By October 15th, all principals and central office administrators completed their self-assessment and goal-setting requirements of their evaluation plan. I met individually with each of the administrators and we talked about specific goals. Every single administrator has a goal around IMTSS because that is our primary area of focus for this year. For all buildings and departments. And they also have their own individual professional practice goals that made the most sense for themselves and where they are. This year, 4 of our administrators are currently on 1-year evaluation plans due to their tenure in the district. But in the first 3 years in a new district, they are required a new role. It's required to be a 1-year plan. So those administrators have been notified that their mid-cycle is to be completed by February 1st. And those will all be done. School visits have been the most important aspect of my first year. As we all know, things happen day to day and you don't always get to where you want to go. But I have been doing bi-monthly walkthroughs for every other month. That's what most people. Still track.
that was actually biannual.
Yes, I remember that, yes. So I
That was like 5 years ago.
still track.
She was ready for that to come up.
I actually went and like Googled bi-weekly versus bi-weekly to see which one it was. And so those have been really, really great. The school residencies were so much fun. And then the principals and I do walkthroughs together at least once every other month. That's in addition just to my, visits and pop-ins, things like that. And then finally was my new superintendent induction program. Since July 1st, we've had 6 of our meetings. They're either in person or virtual. It's really great to have other superintendents that are in the same position to talk to and say, am I crazy? What's going on in your district? So it's been really, really great. Huh? It's like, yes.
That's a quick conversation.
Yes.
So, and then of course, I meet with Dr. Wong on a regular basis. Once every other week, we do a virtual call for an hour and then we text, and she is actually coming to our leadership meeting next week as well. So we can do that. So, I'm happy to provide you with any evidence of any of these things or additional information. And this is also an opportunity for you to provide any feedback. We can do that tonight, or we can do that at the next meeting if you'd like. Just as my evaluation process is very public.
I mean, I think maybe just some more, so, seeing, like, what you're seeing on your walks, maybe some more, like, we need
Sharing that
to
information.
really look at, the flooring at the school because I tripped on it, something like a little more substance of what you see. I think it's just going
You got it.
a little more substance.
Of
into,
course.
If
Well, the visits are.
the problems you're seeing are, something that we need to address as well. Or if there's no problems, even better.
I do think, one of the positives, like Justine mentioned, some of your reporting, I think the two of you together, if you've made it, because I think more like you, so it's easier to see and understand, and I think in turn is helpful to the public, to kind of understand things as well, so I've liked what you guys have done there. So thank you for that, yeah. Okay.
Two things. One's a question, one's a statement, start with the statement. I think you guys have done an awesome job of coming in. Obviously, I think wanting a brand new role, bringing someone from a different district coming in, you're so fairly new. I mean, I think the team in general has been very transparent with us. I think to Justin Sherry's point too, like getting all the data, seeing stuff has been way better. I don't even want to say really communication because we communicated well before, but I feel like everything's laid out a lot easier. Just in general, from whether it's drafts to budgeting to, just easy to read, easy to see. I think that's the kind of the statement. And my question is to you, Jen, what's been, what are we in 6, 7 months now, whatever? What's been your greatest story so far? And then what is an area that you think that you kind of got caught off guard by and what we can improve on?
This moment right now.
So I've said since like the second week of September that I'm gonna write a book, and because there's just certain things that come up day to day that you just can't make up. So I think one of the best things for me has just been the positive interactions with students and families, because in my teaching and learning role, I had a lot of interactions with students and teachers, but not as much with families. And there are times where a family will reach out and say, this is the challenge that we're having, and just be really honest and vulnerable with you. And it's a great opportunity for us to make connections, to get to know families on a really different level. I've said it 1,000 times, like the residency days were the most fun days I had. I really love to do them every single year, just because it gives you a great opportunity to engage with students. I have an awesome superintendent advisory council. They come and they eat pizza with me every other month and talk about just things that are going on in their schools, and I'll bring them a couple topics and they'll bring me a couple topics. It's just been really, really great to see teaching and learning from a different lens. I think the thing that has probably surprised me the most, but really not surprised me, is some of the day-to-day needs that we get stuck in. And at the end of the day, the buck stops with me. And it's really important that whatever the situation is, I'm giving it my attention. And so, there might be times where I had a plan to do something and I'm not getting there because this issue that came up, took more time than I thought it would. But it's, I think being a new superintendent is a really difficult job. But I can't imagine doing it in a place where you didn't know people and you didn't have those established relationships. Like, that's been the saving grace, is knowing the people and the players. So, thank you.
So, anything else? No? All right. We've waited all night for this one.
I know.
He's gonna be so quick. He's gonna be so quick. You jinxed this because you said this was gonna be a quick meeting.
No, I was
Sarcasm.
No, I was like optimistic. I was willing.
And so,
I was like, all right.
Yeah, exactly.
I was hoping.
All right, you're right.
How about, so I just,
So is Brian.
I just want to say, I really appreciate the back and forth. The conversation that we had a couple of months ago was terrific. So kind of as an outgrowth to that, I know there was a request to dive into deeply into the MCAS data. So I'm just gonna go through some slides in terms of setting the background, the texture, the format. When we get to the individual data slides themselves, I'll keep them posted for folks to see, but won't keep them up there for too long, just so that we can be intentional and purposeful and mindful of this time. So if,
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Before we start, we already went through a lot of MCAS data
Yes.
in a previous meeting. So if this seems like we're flying through this on the public side of things, that's why you can go back and watch that meeting and then maybe catch up and watch this out.
and I would say to anybody as well who's watching at home, I would create a space if somebody wanted to take some time and unpack it with me. I love to do this work. It actually gets me excited. I know it sounds strange, but to be able to really go to root cause and to look at things is actually very valuable for me. So it makes me really happy to do it. In terms of the data, if we could go to the next slide, please. It's grades 3 through 8, it's ELA and math, and part of the ask from our last meeting was some comparison to dark districts, and those are listed right below. Next slide, please. If we go to what DART is, it's just simply, it's a district accountability and review tool. So it takes districts that have similar demographics, socioeconomic status, high need students that are comparable to Norton. It's not a geographical representation. So I know that some of the towns you saw are like, well, Sandwich is on the Cape. Indeed it is, but demographically, they share some profile information with us. And it just helps us identify information over time. Next slide, please. And again, I have referred to that for folks that want to dive in more. Norton has a DESI Dark page, which has a high number of informational pieces there. Next slide, please. Dart's value, we know it's not perfect, but there are enough numerical and geographical pieces to give us a basis of comparison. So I'll then move into like the history of where we are. So we know that in 93, state testing was adopted as part of the Mass Educational Reform Act, and that publicly available data goes back to 1998. So really the first generation was referred to as the legacy scale, and there were 4 scoring categories: advanced, proficient, needs improvement, and failing. That was the first iteration of MCAS. That shifted in 2017, and those scores are often referred to as next generation. So the categories, as you'll see up there, are a little bit different. If we wanted to continue to build some context for the next slide, please. You're going to notice in some of the data that you're going to notice a downward trend from when there was a transition from the legacy to the next. And so that means the number of exceeding and meeting students in each category has dropped in schools, grades, and across the state. Now, next slide, please. Some additional context, because again, there's been a number of different events. We had no MCAS in 2020, partial in 2021. There are some districts for which longitudinal data is not available for every year, so you'll notice a couple of blanks in the charts. I think it's important to understand that MCAS is important, but it really is only one data point, and it's not a sum total of who we are as a district. We use it because it's a basis of comparison between students here in Norton and every other district in the state. So it's kind of a starting point to look at that indication. So we'll start by just looking at some more additional context. We could go from paper to computer-based testing. Norton gradually transitioned, and we went fully digital in 2018. And so this is the data for grade 3 ELA. And in all the slides that follow, we're going to look at trend lines. You can see very clearly on the graph where Norton is. Norton is dark purple, the state is red, and then our dark districts are in those other colors. So I'll give you a chance to look at that if you haven't already. Next slide, please. And again, similarly, grade 3 math, it's Norton dark purple, the state in red, and additionally other districts. just a couple of big picture things to look at as we go through the remainder of the slides. So you'll notice that you're gonna see generally somewhat of a downward universal trend from about 2015 on. Part of that was the reflection in the increased rigor of the test. You're gonna see as well that that coincides largely with the state average. When we get to the high school slides, we're gonna see that the end product is actually good. The high school at the end does well, both in a numerical sense, but also across against the state average. So the product that we have here in Norton Public Schools is a good one. And then the third piece is that you'll also see from 2020 to 2023, because of interrupted learning, you're going to see the scores hit a bit of a battle. I'm sorry I did that a little bit out of order. I should have done that on the slide, but just something to look at as we get through.
So can I ask one question?
Yes.
When we look at these dark districts, do we know what the criteria is that matches us with these districts?
We do. So one is enrollment, another is demographics. So for instance, number of students that have free or reduced lunch, number of students that have similar special education surveys, other financial indicators as well. Those are kind of the big picture ones, which is why it doesn't always align geographically.
Yeah,
Or financially, right? Like you see like a place like Foxborough,
Yes,
we
that's
know.
the first one that came to mind.
Right, and it's so interesting because you look at Foxborough is yellow, and Foxborough is almost consistently at the top of these charts in every single grade level, every single subject area. But at the state level, they take Norton and they take Foxborough and they compare the two districts. You know, so it comes down to special education percentages, free and reduced lunch, educator proficiency, all of those things.
So I know we used to have, what was it, the website, we used to have it on our website, I forget what the name was, but you could go and
Yeah,
click.
fair enough. Yeah.
And none of these were on there back then, that was only 3 or 4 years ago. I remember it was like East Bridgewater, Groton, Dunstable.
Yep, so East Bridgewater is still, one of the, EB is still on there. Ashburnham, Westminster, Bellingham is considered a like district for us. I have a few others here that I was doing this per pupil. Stoneham, Amesbury, East Longmeadow.
So I would suggest that we don't get caught in the weeds of individual towns. Because I'm not sure that there's really a ton of value to be added there for this exact reason. You know, if you look at us and say, okay, how do we trend versus the data set? You don't want another small data set. You want the largest data set you can have, and that's the state. So for what it's worth, I'm not trying to cut you off the these, but I don't know if I would go through slide by slide of us versus the state versus all the cohort, the dark cohorts. I think us versus the state is really where you're going to see the information that I was looking for personally. So it's just a thought, because I don't know that looking at this many lines going up and down and back and forth is showing us anything. And perhaps we can certainly make available the supplemental packet that I shared as well. Do you have the ones with just the state? So they're not actually in the slide deck. That was the supplemental packet, all right, which was shared. But what I can do, you can certainly make that available. So the reason I'm asking is because I wasn't here for that good discussion on public meeting, the Zoom stuff. We're on Zoom right now.
Yeah.
So can we discuss the ones that
Absolutely.
discuss in the state without being shown? Yes, because
Because they can still see the same information that's there, right? The only thing that
Right.
was done was the other ones that we
Right.
connected.
So if we could, next slide, please. We can move to grade 4 ELA, and again, I'll just leave it up there for a second if anybody has any questions, and help the folks at home to kind of focus on, if you're looking at simply Norton and the state is in red and Norton is in purple. And if you have specific questions, please stop, I'll be happy to answer them. Next slide, please. And again, that does definitely show the trend with Foxborough
you might not know, why this happened, but it did seem to be like ELA, once you got to the new legacy test, or the old one, whatever, it's 17.
Yes.
We kind of went like, okay, with math, we kind of stayed similar.
Yeah.
Do we have any like clue on why that happened? Just did the test get that much harder in English, but not in, or ELA, but not in math?
So the questions are totally different.
Yes.
So the legacy MCAS for ELA specifically was always multiple choice. So you would read a passage and then you would do a multiple choice answer. The way that it works now is it's students sometimes will have to compare two texts. So they'll have an article about a topic and then they'll have a fiction, like say it's with the Dust Bowl, right, hypothetically. They'll have two different things and then they'll have to compare and contrast the different types of reading. There is a lot of highlighting in the passages and pulling up details. It'll be where you have, 5 different sentences and then you have to kind of put them in order or, talk about the character. It's very, very different where as much as we all talk about how math has changed, math's math, right? There was always a component of multiple choice questions with the assessment, and there was also a component of students had to do their math, show their work, and write the answer. So that part didn't change as much. But I also think, for those of us who have done this for a long time, like you can see in grade 4 math, in grade 4 ELA, that grade 4 has always been a challenge for us. You can see how that, math kind of plateaued and was below the state average as well.
All right, so I'll stop you right there, because this is the only thing I wanted to talk about. When I look at these charts, and I'm not looking at the charts without any of the dark cohorts, I'm just looking at the state and the town one. And the reason I'm looking at just that is because the state tells me on a grander scale, was the test harder, easier, et cetera? It should be a relative comparison for us to determine, to take out the variable of how hard the test was given to. So how do we do against the state? Is really kind of what we want to look at. I look at grade 3 ELA and math, and we kind of hover right around the state. A couple times they're a little bit ahead of us, a couple times a little bit ahead. I looked at grade 5. We're generally ahead of them. In 2023 ELA, they beat us there, but generally we're better than them. Grade 5 math, same thing. Grade 6, same thing. Grade 6 math, same thing. 7 ELA, 7 math, same thing. Math, a little bit of a hiccup. 2021, 2022, but generally kind of track with them. 8 ELA, 8 math, same thing. We track with them. 10 math, 10 ELA. We're actually a little bit better than them generally, which takes us back to grade 4. Grade 4 ELA, we fairly consistently are behind them. And grade 4 math, we almost exclusively are behind. And it's not anymore a small number. It seems to be a fairly decent difference between where we are and where they are. Roughly 10 points in most cases, sometimes more, sometimes a little less. So we have this conversation all the time. We talk about that it's a transition school, and I don't care. We got to figure that out. And I think, and here's the thing, and Brian, for the background, we consistently see this, and this is why I wanted to see historically how it looked. Consistently, we are well below the state in that grade, particularly in that subject. So we got to figure that out.
And I think we've already begun some really great work to help figure that out. So this year, we're onboarding new instructional materials for math, stepping stones. In fact, the PD provider was in district today. And so for the last 2 days, myself and Christy Beats, along with the building principals, went to every classroom in grades K through 5 in the district. And we did what we would call walkthroughs. They were non-evaluative observations. They were meant to look at how the materials were being utilized. They were meant to look at the instructional routines. They were meant to look at the acquisition of knowledge that kids were having. Because I think one of the things that we needed are curriculum upgrades. And we've known, and I know historically, and Jen and I and the leaders have had conversations about
the need for that really current evidence-based math materials to support our curriculum. So we've had a laser-like focus on this, for the past couple of years. And I know, and I'm very confident that this year and beyond, with these new materials, coupled with our IMTSS structures, are gonna make a big difference in these schools.
So when can we see those results? When are we going to see those MCAS scores back that we should be?
I think we will start to see progress as early as this year. Oftentimes, with new curriculum adoption, assessment scores are a lagging indicator, but based upon our mid-year checkpoint, in terms of scope and sequence, in terms of the style of instruction, in terms of the pacing, our consultant said today, you are at or above where you're supposed to be. In seeing those classrooms as part of our work, the teachers are doing a great job.
And I'm glad that we're looking at K through 5 and thinking holistically, but at the same time, K through 3 and 5 don't seem to be having a problem. So, you know, I'm not pointing a finger, I'm showing the data. And the data is telling me something really specific here.
Absolutely. And you know, it's interesting because when you think about the 10 years of data, there have been so many factors that have changed over time. You've had staff retire and new staff come in. You've tests have changed, the dynamics have changed. Programs have changed. There have been so many different factors that have gone back and forth over those 10 years. But the one thing that has been consistent is the performance. So it's interesting to kind of.
And the last two things I'll say this because I know we all want to get out of here. So the first was the rest of the numbers. While I point out okay we're at but when I point out where we are versus the state, how we kind of track with those guys, it's great. Really, the goal is really to be better,
Yes.
right? So while it's not a blind spot, it's not a negative blind spot. It really we're not meeting what our expectations should be there either. Our expectations should be that we're doing better than the state.
And as a
Right.
leadership team, we talk about that regularly, so part of the process in improving all around was to really fold this in with our entire leadership team to really work on specifically what we're doing now, go through the charts, identify strengths, identify areas of need, and go through with a protocol for improvement. So how can we, as a leadership team, collaboratively work with our staffs across the district to help raise achievement?
And this comparison is probably, this is not the second thing I was going to say, this comparison is probably the only thing I care about when it comes to this test. I don't care how we did versus last year or whatever. So that data is absolutely useless to me. This is the only data that, in my opinion, gives any true look into how we're actually performing as a district versus districts as a whole. And the last thing I was saying, this was what I forgot was, I think we can agree, particularly with math, that it's a building block topic. So if you have a great education in first grade, second grade, third grade, it builds. So I almost wonder, like, if we could correct that fourth grade, where would we be in fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, right? So we track kind of along with the state. Would our math numbers be actually better than the state if we could rectify that fourth grade issue? So that's the last thing I have to say.
Any other comments on that? Mrs. Winsper, could we go to grade 5 math, please? All right, we'll go off. Mrs. Winsper, if we could go through the remainder of the slides, then to get to up through up to the slide that says what has the NPS leadership team done. And again, just before, if there's anybody who wants to have a deeper conversation about this, I would welcome that. So what our leadership team was, I referenced before, we're doing a DataWise protocol, and the DataWise protocol is run through Harvard University. Well, many of us are doing an online course. We reviewed this data, and we're talking about next steps. And what we're going to be doing as part of our leadership team on a monthly basis is make that purposeful time for data review. so that we're really looking at data from the same lens, developing a common language, and creating a real streamlined process that we can share that with our staffs. Next slide, please. And so a lot of these have kind of emerged. This was our initial analysis. So you see the pattern. We want to reframe the test as being important, but we do not want to create undue stress. And as alluded to earlier, the new evidence-based curricula, I think, is really going to help with us. Next slide, please. And again, we're going to continue with our pinpointed DART data use. And I think, as came up here in our district leadership team meetings, we've concurred that the DART data doesn't always feel like an apples to apples comparison. Next slide, please. So again, we've covered a lot of this in terms of changes, level of emphasis, format, disruptions in learning, test design. So these results are not gospel, they're an opportunity for growth. Next slide, please. And just in terms of what steps have we have taken, the Office of Teaching and Learning for years has been really working aggressively. We have a series of new curricula that we're going to be onboarding. IMTSS is going to be central and pivotal to this role. And I think, as came up earlier in the budget conversation, we're also going to be looking at all of our schedules to optimize time on learning. Next slide, please. So I'm pleased to announce, this has been internal, but we did receive nearly a $200,000 grant from DESE for vacation February and April for identified students for Math Acceleration Academies. So it's going to run very much like the Summer Acceleration Academies did, and that will be available for our neediest students in grades 3 through 10. So that's going to be a feather in our cap. Further, we're going to be looking at science and social studies curriculum adoptions, continue with IMTSS, have more professional development about data-based decision-making, and continue to provide those targeted early steps for students in use. And really, the last slide is about scheduling. We're going to continue to pound the pavement for every possible grant, and we're going to continue to have a comprehensive, detailed PD plan informed by our educators to help move this forward. So we are aware, we're on it, and we're going to see. And this, I always reference our strategic plan because that's us keeping eyes on the prize. And just, again, appreciate your time. And any follow-up, please let me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I think, just quickly to Dennis's point, like, I do agree that state average is good to look at, but I also do think looking at what other districts that are comparable according to the DART, I'm also kind of like you, I'm second ahead, that I have based on population size, based on what is comparable to Norton resident-wise and tax reference-wise. I have it based on what we are as a school, the population and everything else, and running it and looking at numbers per pupil, where are we testing at and everything else. You know, I had a few different schools, Amesbury, Belchertown, Bellingham, Devon, Foxborough, Sandwich, towns around us, because we always get that question, why does Mansfield Easton have all this stuff? Per pupil rates, I have this all in here, and just looking at it, my biggest concern, and I think again from a data standpoint, is we're pretty normal and average when it comes to gas testing on every single facet of what we're doing. Now, normal and average is okay. We obviously, there's room for improvement, you do better. And I think another huge piece of like looking at this and seeing it from like how much are we spending per pupil, I think we really need to have a conversation with North Attleboro, because how the hell do they do what they do with the per pupil cost that they're doing it at? And I just didn't do just on tests, I did SAT scores as well, and how they're getting one of the biggest bangs for their buck of their kids testing at a very, very high level with a very, very low, much lower than North per pupil cost. So like, I think that those are the areas that I would kind of like to see from leadership team in terms of like, what districts are doing this really well? And again, what are they doing that, back to the recreating the wheel? What can we do to kind of incorporate those and bring those into Norton to say, hey, listen, this is working really well in this district. North Attleboro, I know it's a little different, they're a little bit more populated than us, they're definitely more commercial. but their resident tax base and what they're doing is very closely similar to what we're doing here in Norton. And again, what are they doing better than us, and how are they doing it with less money per people, and how are they testing some of those, you know? And again, I think there's a few times on here that I was like, oh, wow, like, their cost is really, really high, they're getting a whole ton of money to fund their per pupil cost, and their test scores are worse than us, you know? So I think like looking at that type of data and seeing it out on paper, I was kind of actually surprised, you know, even like, we always talk about Easton and being, they kind of get everything funded for them. Easton's not really much crazier than we, like, they don't get a whole ton, I think per pupil cost, they're actually spending less per pupil than we do, you know? So what are they doing that they've gotten this glorified, we're putting them up here, we want to be like Easton, you know, they have everything going over there, the resident tax base is great, and like, why are they testing so much better, you know, on a same level where they're not getting more funding?
Nick, can I ask what the differences between like a North Attleboro and us and the student spending?
So North Attleboro, yeah, hold on. North Attleboro on per pupil spending, I will give you, this is from the state, so this is dark.
Is it 2021?
Some of them are 2021, some
Yes.
are updated, but on the ones I got, North Attleboro was basically 14,000 and change per pupil, and Norton was 60.
Oh, so the information that I have from department, or from the state, the FY 21 per pupil in district spending, Norton, we have 14,917. And let me pull up North Attleboro. It's hard because you look at different things, you get
Right.
different data.
And that's, so, one caveat,
Mhm.
as you're looking, so we talked earlier about kind of
Yeah.
getting this per student spending. Some years ago, this is a while back, so I'm gonna, we went before, I'm trying to remember, damn, it might have been there, it might have been before you, I don't remember, but, we went before, it was definitely Joe and I, went before the FinCom, and we're discussing the per pupil spending, and I said, you know, listen, if you look at the data, if you take the per pupil spending and you break it down, we have an inordinately large amount spent on, like in insurance and whatever.
Yeah,
So-
I remember that.
The per pupil spending, you have to call that out, because that's not gonna change whether or not I have, you know, I spend $2,000 or $200 on a teacher's benefits, isn't gonna change the education. So you really have to go, okay, well, what are we spending on learning, not per pupil spending? Because that's just a simple, you spend this, divide by that, and here's your number.
Yeah.
So be careful when we're looking at those numbers, because that, I'm not suggesting that that's what's happening here, but, you know, be aware of that. That's, you know, and the other thing is too, like, I'll say this, and this is necessarily a popular topic, but sometimes the socioeconomic makeup of a town matters a lot too. You know, and I don't mean this like in the, they pay this, they pay that, whatever, but sometimes there's just, you know, education is just valued more at the home in one place than it is in another. And it's just the reality, you know, and that's true sometimes, like with an immigrant population where they value, you know, they value education. Like it's just, it is what it is. So we may not like to hear that, but it's something to think about as well. So.
And I think, you know, one of the things that we discussed when we met as a leadership team, we were talking about the scores and data and all these things. And what we reminded ourselves is we can't control any of those things that are outside the four walls. All we can control is what happens when our students are with us in the classroom, 6.5 hours a day, what we're doing. So it's really important that we're looking at instructional practice and some student support and what the curriculum materials are. Because those are the things that
So when you give us a purple spending, we should call that number out.
absolutely.
You can keep it as a side note to it, but we really should be looking at what are we spending on people,
Not insurance.
not
Absolutely.
what do we spend per pupil, what do we spend on each pupil?
Absolutely. Great.
But yeah, anyway, I think like that's like, because again, when you're looking at just test scores, there's so many other factors than just test scores, you know?
Absolutely.
So it's like you have to layer that. And again, it's very hard to approach it in a way that makes sense to everybody, but like layering it from a standpoint of like, hey, yes, we are a little bit above or below Foxborough in this situation. However, Foxborough also spent, whatever the number is, 2,500 more per pupil. That is also going to affect this. but, you know, Easton, they have all their kids in one elementary school. That's hugely helpful for blah, blah, blah. Like, I think all of that stuff is also very important in terms of just like, oh, here's a test score, here's the state, here's all of our districts. There's so much more into this.
Without
Just,
flashing
you
my
know,
nose.
you know,
Because with all of these data points, it's almost impossible to find true apples to apples. We do the best we can in terms of what's available. But really, kind of to Jen's point earlier, like our focus is so pinpointed on teaching and learning, the new instructional materials, making sure that our SEL program really adopts well and adapts well and meshes well, because we have to remember, from a humanistic standpoint, we still have a lot of kids that are dealing with a lot of things. And it's really about being intentional and purposeful with our time and our resources. But having these conversations, and really, we've been doing this at the administrative level, and we're gonna continue to do it, is really gonna keep us laser focused on that movement, along with the continued evolution of our IMTSS system, to really get kids that have a little bit of a struggle, the help that they need in an immediate sense.
and I think a perfect segue to our last topic is like, I also looked at a huge portion of what we do in our residential tax. This is where the town gets very confused. You compare Norton to like districts of Norton, not necessarily the schools. Norton has a higher residential tax by almost 40 cents per thousand. If you take the Norton schools versus other districts, we are 7 cents less on average. If you take Norton surrounding town area, the average is 12.81, Norton is 12.95. We're being taxed just like everybody else, and to ask the taxpayers to pay more money for some type of override that everyone keeps talking about is going to get shut down. It's straight there, it's going to get shut down again, that we really need to, I think, going back to the budget and saying, we really need to figure out what we're going to do in terms of how are we making up this 3.4 million, because I don't think it's coming.
My counter to that would be that most of the surrounding towns have a fairly decent business base.
Huge, correct, but yeah, we're riding the residential tax, and I've said this to Brian multiple times. We have to ride the residential tax and the residents and the taxpayers in town, because we don't have the commercial base that Mansfield, Foxborough, Easton, Bridgewater, whoever else has. We don't have.
And we probably never will.
We probably never will. No one wants to.
We're not structured that way.
So it's either, your taxes either go up and you increase that tax rate, or the money's gonna stay the same, and we're going to really have to try to figure out where are we making up the $2.4 million, because to me, I don't think it's coming. The override's not happening. Everyone just got their tax bill, look at it. My tax bills in 3 years has gone up a significant amount of money, and I just don't think this is gonna be the time to say, you know, I know FinCom and Select Board are like, we need to have a united front. You're not gonna get a united front, you know, if you didn't get a united front a few years ago, you definitely ain't getting it now, you know, so I really, back to that conversation of the budget, that $2.4 million. I don't think we're anybody, we're looking at that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, what we need and what we can get are two different things.
I think the comment about the United Front though wasn't centered around just an override though. I think it was just, I don't like Dinesh is talking about having these conversations, you know, and because before, and you know, years ago, it was contentious.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
it was us versus them.
Right, exactly.
And I
And
think
that's
for most
come,
sides,
right,
it was us versus them.
that's come a long way. So I think that's what,
Yeah, the United Front is probably more than that, but, and you're absolutely right about that, and Nick's absolutely right. I don't see the appetite for work,
yeah.
but doesn't mean we can't have a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, that's what, right.
Tell us, I think it's done perfect. People want it, put it on the ballot and see what happens, but I think we also have to realize the reality of the situation.
Well, we have to be
All we
prepared,
got.
right, exactly. We have to be prepared.
And I think that was the point about showing you.
Right, yeah,
Those things.
right. And we in turn have to show the community, that's part, that's what we did.
If they, to the point, if they don't want it, to Zach's point, if they don't want it, then at least we've had the conversation,
Right.
we know where we all stand.
Right.
It's okay, I can accept that.
Right.
I can accept the losing, I can't accept not playing.
I think it's one of those things where, I mean, you know, give the people being the board, give them all the information, and make a decision. You know, it shouldn't be,
Bingo.
you know, campaigning for one side or another. It should just be, here's the facts of the matter.
It's very
If it
simple.
passes, it passes, if it doesn't, it doesn't, but, you know, if it should come to light this year by whoever pushes it, I mean, you know, more power to them if they take that on. But I think it's one of those things where, you know, most departments are not gonna be relying on the fact that override may or may not pass. pass. I mean, if it happens, I will gladly accept the money that's.
And when it's fine, like, I was fool.
Yeah.
Like, it's-
All right, do we have any other business? Anybody else?
I do.
See,
No,
No.
not tonight, no. So I had a couple of community members, approach me about some things that they heard, and so I said I would be more than happy to bring it up to the committee, and so I don't know if you have answers tonight, or if it's something that you need to look into. But one of them was the grading policy for the high school, which I know was like a long, drawn out, I think, policy, right? That was I think, before I think actually there was a vote, but I don't know if I actually voted in it. And so I didn't know, it had to do with that, like, if you don't submit any work, you could get a 50, was it me, I may be saying this.
No, you're not right.
Inappropriate, right, something like that. But then I believe the final policy was, no, you have to you can't just get a 50 for not doing anything. There needs to be work submitted and whatever. So from my understanding is that from what this community member said, is that they were hearing and seeing that this wasn't actually happening and that 50s were being given without the work.
So I guess what I would say to anything along those lines is that the first line of conversation is always with the teacher.
Yeah.
If it's your child, or if it's always to the teacher and the guidance counselor, and then the high school administration. The other thing that they could do is to put something that's a little bit more specific.
Yep.
Into writing and to share that. Again, I always highly recommend people go through that process.
Yeah.
Before they come to either the superintendent or the school committee. I think that's really important. But without other details, it's
Yeah.
really hard for me to say, oh, yes, or, you know.
Justine, can I ask you a question? So it sounds like you're saying the policy we enacted is not being followed by some teachers,
Yes.
right? So I think your solution of go to the teacher first is, in this case, it's not somebody who's getting a 50, it's somebody who's saying this person is getting a 50 and doing the work, it sounds like. So I guess I would kind of just say, as a school committee, we pass policy. And I think the expectation from the 5 of us is that is followed.
Agreed.
I know damn right well that there are policies we pass that are not being followed. I know that for a fact. It bothers me. I don't say or do anything about it because I'm picking my battles. But again, we pass policy. The expectation is that that policy is followed by everybody. It is not, policies that we pass are not suggestions. If they were, they would be called suggestions, not policies. That's all I will say on that topic. But we are well aware that people are not always following.
And I think the other, I guess, if it's coming from someone's not following policy, I know this, like, there's a lot of things out there that are rumors and that are conversations, and it's really important that if you have a concern about something, in that case, it's about somebody that's not following it because maybe that's not your child, but you believe other students are getting credit for work that's not done. That's a conversation like, hey, Dr. Dahlman, I believe that this is happening, this is taking place. And
I think it's one of those
need the
things
best
where
person to kind of look into that.
to investigate it, someone needs to complain about it,
Yeah.
not just talk.
Yeah.
I mean, my daughter said something the other day, I'm like, oh, that's against such and such policy, and I mean, it wasn't her, it was another student, whatever, but like, it wasn't a policy not being followed, but it was one of those things where my daughter's telling me, I'm like, well, that doesn't affect my kid. You know what I mean? So maybe that's my error, is I don't read.
Yeah, and this is always a tricky one, because it's like, okay, we don't have a whole lot of information here. Is it a rumor? Is it real? Is it fake? We will never know unless the person comes forward and says this is what's happening. But at the same time, too, like, and I think we've had this conversation too, it's like, we're elected officials, not that this has happened to me yet, well, it has happened to me, but not this situation, but like, someone comes up to me and they're like expecting me to go and do something. You know, so if it's like, it gets to a point where it's like, okay, hold on. I can do something about it. Is that a private phone call? Do we bring it up at the meeting? What's rumor? What's real? It's a difficult task being on the elected side, if you will, you know, of like, when do we step in? Where do we bring it up?
Well, and then,
I guess, right?
and,
What's our function?
you know, what I would always advise is to ask people to bring their concerns closer, I think, to the level that they can be handled. If the communication was, I know this is happening, I have evidence this is happening, I went to the principal and they told me there's nothing they could do about it.
Yeah.
That's a different story.
Yeah, I
right?
mean, there's definitely a chain of.
Or they weren't gonna do anything about it, like whatever that was, or didn't even know that.
So Justine, just so like, this has happened to me a number of times where people have expressed a concern, an opinion, and typically what I do is I would pick up the phone and call Jen. And just make her aware, because like, I don't want time to lapse. You know what I mean, in order for us to have a meeting, so I would just pick up the phone and talk to Jen and say, where do we go from here? This is what I'm being told, I need to get back to this person and give some kind of, solution or where to start, kind of thing.
It was this week, so that's why I was like, oh, I'll just pick it up.
Yeah,
And it was not within 48 hours, so I was like, oh, okay, like, absolutely. I just thought because it was a policy that they were now talking about, that's where I felt like maybe,
And this is another slippery slope here too. The teacher following policy has nothing to do with us.
yeah.
Different
Right.
goals.
See, I
Quite frankly,
think we don't have enough
no.
information on this story.
Correct.
Yeah, and I
And
didn't know it was this
Yeah.
week, but.
I think this is where it
sometimes
gets
time is of the
tricky.
essence.
Now I'm putting myself in my parents' shoes on. Yeah, I'm a little bit different if you haven't noticed. But like, I can also see parents, like, let's say a policy is being broken by Vinnie Sears, perfect example. He goes and breaks a policy on us. He goes and breaks a policy on us. We might not know about it. If a parent who's getting, the services and knows Vinnie very well or whatever, you don't want to make it into a thing of like, I don't want to be the person who's calling out Vinnie for that policy. If it's a principal, I don't want my kid to be targeted because I call him out on a policy.
Common.
So I think that's what happens, unfortunately, for us,
Common.
you know?
And people have, they're just relationships in town as well, right?
Yeah, sure. And Vinnie probably doesn't break policy.
Yeah, sure, he was
Just like a whole lot.
Yeah, definitely throw him under the bus. They are always welcome to call me or email me as well, and I will do my best to point them in the right direction, and get an answer.
And I have a
You said-
great piggyback.
You said two though, did you have another one?
Oh, do you have one more? Sorry.
I did. I just didn't know if we had a plan on following up with like the PBIS and how that's all going and the IMTSS and.
So PBIS, it will be presenting at the first meeting in February. They were originally scheduled for the 25th, but now that's a joint meeting. It's just not enough time. So they'll be at the first meeting in February. And then IMTSS, we're also gonna do a special education update. And potentially bring that into executive session, depending on, how much the committee really like to have details. We'll probably do an IMTSS update in March, but I'll add that to my list. If that works for you.
Can we also, while we're speaking, future state meetings, talk and have the SROs come in for like their.
Yeah, so we'll do that in executive session.
Yeah, that would be an executive session.
And I think another thing that, you would, sorry.
Yeah.
Wonderful fields. So. I try to, everyone knows, I'm on the North Youth Baseball Board, that's kind of how I see it. We do try to rent our field so often, whatever. Again, from our standpoint, it was always, Norton High School, Norton Middle School, sports first, everyone's on the same page, I think everybody in town is on the same page, that's how it was presented. Then it was supposed to be used sports then.
Yeah. That's the problem, that is
That is the tier.
That is the tier.
Correct. Now, if you want to say tier policy, however, that's whatever, that's what we
That's
do.
how it goes to, that's how we dole out the fields in terms of preference or, priority. So when it comes to rec, it's, like, if baseball and soccer both wanted something and soccer put it in first, then you
Yeah,
have to
that's how it goes. So,
Yes,
this
in
one-
order of receipt, I guess.
yes. So I guess I have two questions. One, we don't set procedure. Do we know what the procedure is in terms of, this is completely out. I want to start Ultimate Frisbee Youth League in Norton, Mass. And I have all my insurance and I'm ready to go and I want to rent the fields. How do I do it? What do I do? Who do I talk to? How do I get on the schedule? Whatever. That whole process. And again, I'm assuming we have something. I don't know what it is. That whole process. And then number two, this is where I got a little irritated the other night with Norton Youth Board. And it could be on us. It could be a 50-50. It could be 100% on Norton Youth and not on the schools. Baseball reaches out asking, hey, this is the date we need. We're also looking at these dates with no guarantee of like, we need Friday, June 10th for this, blah, blah, blah. They were just like, this is what we're kind of looking at. We're going to have another meeting about it, and then we'll get you all the dates or whatever. There's already rentals in there for the summer.
So, and the rentals are
Not town, they're paid rentals. Now, I get it. I don't care if we set the policy that all the youth teams have to have their things in by August 1st of the previous year, and then that next summer, August 1st, if your stuff is not in, you no longer get priority. You ran out of priority. But if we don't have, and maybe we do, but if we don't have like set dates, and we're not telling these youth leagues who are, as everyone knows, run by parents and people trying to continue the sport and keeping it alive and everything else, and have some type of rules and regulations in place. Like, okay, hey, we want June 15th for baseball, and we can't get it because you already rented it out. Why would you have done that if we didn't get a first crack at it?
So, and typically the way, and I don't know the specifics around whatever you're asking. A lot of times there are, and I'm only saying this from, I'm gonna put my parent hat on for a second, right? And the volunteering that I do for my own kids. Tournaments that are Columbus Day every year, right? So 5 years from now, we're still going to want to run that field on Columbus Day. I don't know if it comes down if how far in advance we allow people. I don't know, right? So I don't know that. But we can look into that for you. But I think that it may be beneficial to put something like you have to have your schedule, or you don't have to have your schedule, but like your date request for use probably pretty far in advance.
Yes.
Because one of the biggest things for us on these fields is being able to rent and to bring in money. Because as we're having conversations about budget, we know that the maintenance of these fields are extremely important. If we want to be able to continue using them, we need to be bringing in revenue as well. So we want to be able to rent out as much as we can. But we also want to make sure these are community fields, they're open all the time for our families.
So it's a good point, right? Because if we say that we're giving priority to schools first, town league second, and then private teams, whatever, third, if we don't actually have like a date set in, then it really is just first come, first serve.
Yeah.
And if I have a private team and I say, hey, I want to rent the field for the next 30 weekends, every year, like, well, all right, well, I'm basically bumping my
Everybody.
Yeah, I mean, so should that be allowed? No, it probably shouldn't. So if these guys, if they want to do it Columbus Day every year, we should tell them, okay, we can tell you definitively on whatever the date is, August 1st, what our schedule's going to be. If one of the town teams comes in, they get priority. So yeah, I mean, I think that probably makes a lot of sense. It's like, this is the time you have to submit your thing because otherwise it's just first come, first serve.
And I live in this world. I rent a whole mess load of facilities and fields, and I totally get it. There's a lot of moving parts. Aaron has to go and make sure all the high school practices, then the games, then the timing, and all that stuff. So to me, what would make the most sense is once we get that schedule from, we know our practice schedule, generally speaking. We know we're going Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 for boys across, 6 to 8 for women's, whatever it may be. You don't know your games. Once those games are set, it's going to take a while. You got to data and put it into the calendar, make sure everything's going, like whatever. But to your point, we normally get that from Tri-Valley League by mid-October. We give ourselves a month to get all that data imported. Starting November 15th through December 15th. We will do a quick meeting, a Zoom meeting with all the Norton Youth Leagues and say, hey, you have 1 month. By December 8th, you need to get us all your dates that you need requested, week times, everything else. After December 15th, we are renting these fields. Norton baseball checks comes back crying saying, oh, we forgot the date and rented out the tournament. Too bad, you messed up, So it just, and again, maybe we do have that process. I just haven't seen anything, and from what I'm gathering from Norton Youth Baseball, it kind of just seems like we're flying by the seat of our pants a little bit, and it just, to me, it's getting confusing, and it's infuriating. When you look and you're like, wait a second, oh, we can't go Saturday morning to be rented out to a wooden bat. And it's like, wait a second, we didn't even get a chance to put our things in, you've already rented it out. And I think there's big mistakes in Father's Day, Memorial Day tournaments. It's a very simple conversation to say, no, youth baseball, hey, listen, you get, no, that's not always presented. You can say no, but you can certainly look at them and say, hey, President of Norton Youth Baseball, we would really appreciate it. We're gonna make $9,000 off this rental on Memorial Day weekend. You guys can skip Memorial Day, use Lions Field or JCS Field, or come over here to the middle school, wherever, and find somewhere else to go. Make a lot of money for Norton in our budget and helping us with maintaining the facilities and blah, blah, blah. I would say 95% of the time those people are gonna go, not a problem. We know it in advance, we can make our schedule. You know, it's just, it's a give and a take. And it's not, whoever job is not to say, no, we're just renting the field. It is Norton Sports, Norton Youth Sports, and rentals.
Well, I mean,
That's how it was presented.
I know this is all new and we're still kind of going through the weeds on it, but I guess my counterpoint is if Norton Youth Baseball comes to the school the Friday before Memorial Day and that field's booked and they want it for a Memorial Day
No, you're not kicking people out of luck.
No, of course, you know.
That's why I'm
I
saying
feel like this has to be a date.
Like
right?
an
Time frame,
example,
time.
like from all my years in Norton Youth Soccer, you know, you have 9 Saturdays scheduled from the Saturday after Labor Day through and and I would imagine baseball is the same way. So, I mean, it's gotta be a give and take, and I don't know, to your point, I don't know what that policy says, but we shouldn't be turning away anybody, but we also have to be cognizant of everybody else followed whatever policy is there and put in their rental request, so it's gotta be a give and take, like Norton Youth Baseball, you know, can't come to us or go to Wade or Aaron, or whoever it is, like a month before the season and say we need all these dates, because those contracts are probably signed 6, 7, 8 months.
You will not find a bigger person as a supporter of, once you missed your deadline, Norton Youth Baseball, you lose. That's too bad. That's the way the world works. We've now rented the field, but we gave you the chance. We told you, we communicated with you, we made sure that you were aware, we needed your dates by this time. If you don't get them in, too bad.
I also think,
So Jen, can I just say, this might be a bigger conversation. So
I think
it might be helpful to get the policy we're using now.
Yep.
And see if we actually have like a drop dead date for the future, et cetera.
Yeah.
And
I
take a
think
look
we
at that.
add this to the agenda.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think so too. I also think it's, we're running schools, and like, we can't be reaching out to youth leagues all the time and making sure that everyone understands, like, I think there has to be some responsibility on the youth leagues to come to us. We can't
Totally agree.
go to them and say, hey, these are the dates.
But I think when the youth league does reach out, I think it should be a quick PDF file of a one-page paper. Here's all our dates.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this year you missed them. Next year, here's the date. This is the date.
No, I agree.
And it goes back to the whole, I remember last year when we had the one big baseball day or whatever, there was like chairs on the field. The schools, whether we Wade, Aaron, Timmy, whoever, we never got any rules and regulations about what's can go on and off the turf. There was no sign on the thing. And I'm like, no offense, but how would you know? How does grandma, who's coming down to watch their kid, know that there's no chairs on the turf? No one tells them. And the league who's running it has no idea because no one told them either. So I just think, and again, I'm assuming there's some type of process and procedure in place.
Yeah.
That they go through. I just kind of want to see and look at it in terms of like, okay, how does this make sense and how does this all work before this gets into a bigger issue and then we
Well,
have.
I think we know more now, right? We've had them
For sure,
longer.
for sure, right, we've had them
It's a
longer.
learning,
That's the reps.
right, it's a learning curve, and I think that we just relook at that policy,
Yeah, and
revisit
We
this.
should, yeah, because we did present it a certain way.
Yeah.
And it would be unfortunate if we now were doing something
Right.
different. So we should
And alienate
look at the policy,
people.
talk about
Yeah,
it.
we do have a policy that we are writing almost done. We just haven't presented it to you yet. It doesn't have specific dates that you need to have dates in by here in order for a rec to get it. That's something we can absolutely add now because we know it's gonna be an issue. We're a learning curve.
Yeah.
We waited to see how the year went, like the ebbs and flows of it,
It's
who
really
needed
the
it,
full year.
and
Yeah.
exactly.
March, right.
Last year was,
Yeah.
it was
So,
And another piece,
charging.
once all that's done, and you have those schedules in place,
That's gonna look
we can go back to these private companies and say, hey,
Yeah.
here's our schedule, days you want, we're willing to rent.
You can have, and you know,
And, you know, and the $51,000 or what, 44,000, whatever we made up to last year, all of a sudden that number goes to 150, 100, because, I mean, I'm renting fields right now at Ryan for a youth league, who, they're just coming on our field and using them at night. Like, there's no reason why we couldn't have that.
Right.
And we're making money right now in 40-degree weather, you know? So I think, like, ultimately, I think we just need some type of a little bit more
Yep.
wording out on the website, hey, if you wanna rent these, this is where you need to go, this is what you need to do, and then hopefully over time, like, we'll be able to follow.
So why don't we add that to the agenda in
Yes.
February, because the 25th is.
Yeah, no,
accessible.
yeah.
Short month. So I think that sounds good, we'll do that.
Okay, all right, cool.
Oh.
Anything else, you guys?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
second.
All those in favor?